Hey guys, tonight we're heading straight into the teeth of one of the harshest winters ever recorded on the American frontier, the long winter of 1880 to 1881. And just to level with you, you probably won't survive this. Unless you've got nerves of steel, a cast iron stove and maybe a cow living in your kitchen. We're talking blizzards so relentless that time itself seemed to vanish, temperatures that froze livestock mid-step, and families cut off from supplies for months with only hardtack and imagination standing between them and starvation. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. I'd also love to know, what city are you in and what time is it as you're watching this? Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside into the chill of late October 1880, your breath fogging in the air, and it's already too cold for this time of year. The sky has a strange stillness, as if something massive is holding its breath. The horizon disappears into a wall of white-grey cloud. By mid-morning, snowflakes start falling, not the polite kind that drift down like feathers, but wet, heavy ones, slapping your face with icy indifference. You don't know it yet, but this storm is only the beginning of what will become an unrelenting 7-month siege of winter. Your homestead, a low-sod house carved into the Dakota prairie, isn't ready. Who would be? It's October. The usual pattern calls for snow in December, a hard freeze in January and a thaw by March. This storm, though, rages with a fury usually reserved for the dead of winter. You race to haul in what firewood you've got left and slam the door shut against the sudden blizzard outside. By the time the wind dies down 2 days later, the house is nearly buried in a snowdrift. The door won't open until you tunnel it out with a shovel. Your windows are caked with white, letting in nothing but dim blue light. And the real terror settles in, not that it snowed, but that it's still October. You've got months to go. Snow muffles everything. The landscape has gone silent. There's no bird song, no wind, just a weird dead hush. You look out and realise your outbuildings are almost entirely buried. The livestock shelter is flattened under the weight of the snow. You check on your few chickens, shivering and clucking in confusion, and the old cow who looks back at you with wide eyes like she knows what's coming. In town, if you live near one, the general store is swarmed by panicked settlers grabbing flour, salt pork, kerosene, and anything that will burn. There's word that trains might be delayed. Nothing major, just a day or two. But as the snow piles up and the wind keeps blowing, even the iron rails of the tracks vanish beneath the drifts. The trains don't come, then they don't come again, and again. The blizzard was just the opener. In the weeks that follow, the cold settles in like an unwanted houseguest who refuses to leave. At first, you tell yourself this is temporary. It'll melt. It always does. But then November comes, and instead of a thaw, you get another storm. A bigger one. Thunderclaps boom across the plains, a freak sound in a snowstorm, and the snow falls so fast that by morning your chimney is blocked and the house is filled with smoke from your dying fire. You crawl onto the roof coughing to dig it out with a cold shovel, because the alternative is freezing in your sleep. Your neighbour, who lives half a mile away, sends a boy over on snowshoes. He brings word that their cow died in the night. Froze where she stood. They're skinning her now, hoping to salvage the meat before it stiffens too much to butcher. You invite the boy to stay for a cup of something hot, but you don't have much to offer. Just weak tea made from boiled pine needles and some stale cornbread. He thanks you anyway. He's 15, but already has the eyes of someone older, someone who's seen more snow than any boy should. It's early November, and you're trapped. One of the most surreal things about this winter is how it doesn't let up. You keep expecting a break, a day or two of calm, but it just keeps coming. The ground is buried, the fences are gone, even the sun seems to have given up on you. You keep the shutters closed to keep the heat in, but the world outside grows strange, like it doesn't exist anymore. You mark days with charcoal on the wall because your pocket watch stopped working when it got too cold. Your breath fogs indoors, the walls crack with cold, and already people are talking in whispers about how bad this is going to get. Here's the thing, this wasn't just a single bad winter. It was part of a climate event we still don't fully understand. The 1880 to 1881 winter began earlier, lasted longer, and featured more frequent blizzards than nearly any other recorded in North American history. Some say it was part of a broader solar minimum, or even an unusual El Niño-La Niña cycle. Others argue it was just rotten luck, a perfect storm of cold fronts and jet streams gone rogue. There's no consensus. But for the people living through it, the why didn't matter, only the how long. Some families gave up early and left, but travel was dangerous, even deadly. It wasn't just snow, it was ice, wind, and the terrifying possibility of whiteout. People lost in storms just yards from their front doors. Some never made it back. And you? You're still here. You keep feeding the fire. You count the jars on the shelf, knowing they have to last. You look out at the endless snow, and deep down you begin to understand. This winter isn't something you survive by braving. It's something you endure by waiting. Quietly. Carefully. The sky darkens again. More snow coming. You hold your breath. You wake in the middle of the night to silence. Not the good kind. Not the peaceful hush that comes after snowfall, or the sleepy stillness of prairie dusk. This silence is too heavy. Too total. It presses in like the snow itself, as if the world has been blanketed over and smothered. You lie still, listening for the crack of the stove or the groan of the wind against the walls, but there's nothing. Not even the creak of the rafters. It's as if the outside has swallowed every sound. The fire must have gone out. You throw on your heavy coat, well, what's left of it after last year's wear and moth holes, and step carefully across the frozen floor. Even through wool socks the boards burn cold. You open the stove door and see only ash and faint embers. It's early morning and already the house feels colder than it did the night before. You're losing heat faster than you can make it. The walls of your sod home are thick, built from chunks of earth stacked and packed by hand. They insulate better than wood, but only to a point. Snow has drifted so high outside that you have to dig through a tunnel just to reach your door, and most of your tiny window is just a dull square of ice. You light a lantern and check your breath as it clouds around you. It's not just cold, it's bone-deep, spiteful cold, the kind that doesn't just freeze your skin but settles in your joints and waits there. Outside, the storm has passed, but the landscape has changed. Your little dugout looks less like a house and more like a bump in the snow. The barn is gone, completely buried. You only know where it used to be because you stuck a stick in the ground there weeks ago. You poke around to check the chimney again, brush off the snow crusted against it, and listen. Just the faint sound of wind whispering across miles of white. You're not alone, though it often feels like it. Across the prairie, other families are stuck just like you, walled in by snow, clinging to what little they have left. Some live in one-room shacks, others in dugouts like yours. Some built cabins, but they weren't ready for snow this early, or this much of it. You hear later that one family near Brookings had to tunnel upward through their own roof to escape a drift that sealed their door. They used a skillet as a makeshift shovel. You try to imagine what it must have felt like, swinging a frying pan at your own ceiling just to breathe. Life becomes a routine of scraping by. You start your day by checking for drafts, plugging holes in the walls with scraps of cloth or mud that freezes as fast as you spread it. You tend the fire constantly, which means hauling in fuel, and that's already running low. You light one lamp at night, barely enough to see by, but it gives a little comfort. The glow bounces softly against the packed dirt walls, casting shadows that flicker like ghostly fingers. You spend hours staring at nothing. There's no real night and day anymore, just different shades of grey. The snow outside reflects so much light that it messes with your sense of time. One day blends into the next until you're not sure what month it is. You start marking days with slashes on a beam above your bed. It doesn't help much. Time has become abstract, and the silence persists. No birds, no wind, no footsteps outside. It's like the world's volume has been turned all the way down. Every once in a while you think you hear a knock on the door, or a voice calling from the field, but when you check, there's nothing there. You chalk it up to your ears playing tricks on you, but the loneliness seeps in deeper. Your neighbours, if you're lucky enough to have any within walking distance, are likely doing the same. Digging, rationing, waiting. You think about sending a note or a signal, but getting there would mean wading through waist-high snow, maybe higher, and there's no telling if you'd find the trail back. You start having strange dreams. You're walking across the prairie in full bloom, green grass up to your knees and wildflowers waving in the wind. Then the wind turns cold, and the sky darkens, and you're buried. You wake up clawing at your blankets. A little part of you is grateful it's just a dream. The rest of you isn't sure. Here's something odd that no one ever tells you about sod houses. They breathe a little. When it warms slightly, the walls weep. Moisture trickles down in tiny rivulets that freeze when the temperature drops again. You start seeing little icicles forming on the inside, dangling like teeth from the ceiling. They're beautiful in a twisted way, glinting in the lamplight like crystals at a funeral. You remember someone in town mentioning that the government promised new weather reports would help avoid things like this. A few years back, they started something called the Signal Service, trying to predict storms using barometers and telegraphs. But no one predicted this one, or maybe they did, and the warning got buried in snow before it ever reached the prairie. There's debate even now about how prepared people were, or could have been. Some historians argue settlers ignored local warnings, putting too much faith in the new railroad towns and their supply lines. Others say no warning would have mattered. The snow came early and it came fast. Even the native tribes that had adapted to the prairie for generations found the winter brutal, and they were experts at surviving off the land. Still, you wonder, what if you'd gathered more firewood, stored more coal? What if you'd kept the cow inside earlier? What if? You try not to go down that road too far. There's a bright spot though. Your house may be buried, but snow is strangely an insulator. With enough of it piled around your walls, the temperature inside stays just high enough to keep you alive, if barely. It's like living in an ice cocoon. Your breath fogs up your little window slit and you wipe it away just to see the white stretch on and on. No birds, no colour, no sky, just snow. You're sitting by the stove, hands wrapped around a tin mug of something vaguely warm, water steeped with dried roots, maybe a sliver of bark if you're lucky, when the silence breaks. Not with footsteps or a knock, but with the low, far-off growl of something mechanical. You freeze. For a moment, hope stirs in your chest like a candle flickering back to life. Could it be a train? You throw on your coat, shove your boots on over half-frozen socks, and climb out through the tunnel you've dug into the snow. The air outside bites your cheeks instantly. Your nostrils stick together. But you're moving fast now, heart pounding. You trudge up a hill of packed snow, the same spot that, in autumn, had been your front yard, and shield your eyes against the wind. Then you see it. Or rather, you don't. The tracks are gone. You know they're out there, maybe a mile to the west, but now they lie buried under a thick white shroud. What you do see is a faint smudge of black smoke rising above the snowbanks, far in the distance. It's moving, slowly. Probably the local train trying to break through. You hold your breath. But the smoke never gets closer. By late afternoon it's clear. It's stuck. You see the plume stop and hover, then finally vanish into the low-hanging clouds. That was the last train through this stretch for months. And you never even got close enough to hear the whistle. Back inside, you don't say anything. If there's anyone else with you, family, hired hands, maybe a neighbour who came to stay, they already know. No train means no supplies, no coal, no flour, no news. You're sealed off now, cut from the rest of the world by a dozen storms stacked like cold white walls. You go to the pantry, which at this point is more of a glorified shelf. The flour barrel is nearly empty. You can scrape together enough for maybe one more batch of bread, if you stretch it. You've already watered it down so many times that the last loaf crumbled in your hands like dried paper. You chew it anyway. It's calories. That's when you start rationing in earnest. You write out a daily count. How many ounces per person, how many days left. You cut back on everything. Half a biscuit a day, a tablespoon of syrup, no more. Even the lard gets spooned out like it's gold. You start mixing things in, wood ashes, dried grass, even sawdust, just to give the bread some texture. It tastes awful. Doesn't matter. You eat it anyway. And suddenly meals are the centre of your life. Planning them, cooking them, stretching them out like they're elastic. You find yourself scraping the bottom of jars you swore were already empty. You boil bones twice, 3 times, then dry them on the stove and crack them open for the marrow. Your stomach shrinks. Hunger becomes a background noise like the wind. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The railroad was supposed to bring abundance. Trains were supposed to roar in every week with sacks of sugar, crates of potatoes, barrels of molasses. The homestead posters back east had promised as much. Plenty for all. A new life on the prairie. They didn't mention that a blizzard could stop an entire train line cold. Literally. You hear, maybe through a letter smuggled in by some brave mail runner or a neighbour who made it back from town, that the drifts are as high as telegraph poles in some areas. They tried sending a rotary snowplow, mounted on the front of a train. It jammed with ice within minutes. In one story, maybe it's a rumour, maybe not, a locomotive got stuck outside of Huron, South Dakota, and was swallowed by a drift overnight. By morning it looked like a snowbank. They didn't find it for days. Now even the railway workers are holed up. And you're on your own! You pass long hours staring at the wall or listening to the groan of wind pushing against the house. You begin to realise how much you relied on the sound of passing trains. How comforting that low rumble used to be. Now the silence is deafening. No rails screeching, no distant chug, no whistle echoing through the valley. Just the wind and the slow ticking of your heart. You'd think mail would stop too, and mostly it does. But once in a while, someone brave or foolish enough takes it on themselves to deliver a few letters. A teenager on snowshoes. A Norwegian farmer with a homemade sled. These people become legends, not because they survived, but because they kept moving, through drifts taller than houses, through frostbite and wind so fierce it stripped skin from cheeks. One such man, you hear, is travelling from town to town with a sack of mail lashed to his back, and a wool scarf frozen stiff over his mouth. He sleeps standing up against trees to avoid freezing. Delivers letters that might be weeks old but still bring tears, and every now and then a scrap of hope. Supplies coming soon. Or maybe just, we're alive. In the meantime, you find yourself doing strange things to stay occupied. You count the cracks in the ceiling. You recite recipes out loud, remembering how butter used to taste. You reread the same passage from the Bible or a newspaper until the words blur together. If you're lucky enough to be with others, you talk in low voices, about spring, about planting, about anything except how hungry you feel. You don't want to say it out loud. That gives it power. By now the animals have stopped producing. The cow barely moos. Chickens don't lay. You consider culling one just for meat, but that's a hard line to cross. They're not just food, they're hope. You'd rather starve a few more days than kill off the thing that reminds you of a normal life. There's a fringe story going around, probably untrue, that in one of the more isolated towns, a group tried to dig a tunnel through the snow all the way to the next settlement. It collapsed. 2 men were buried alive. Whether or not it happened, you believe it could have. That's the kind of winter this is, the kind that dares you to fight back, then crushes you when you try. Still, you get up the next morning. You scrape the frost from your beard. You light the stove with fingers that barely feel the match. You eat your half biscuit, drink your boiled bark tea, and whisper to yourself, just one more day. You run your fingers along the bottom of the flour barrel, feeling nothing but rough wood and dust. A week ago you thought it was empty, but now you know better. Now you sift that dust like it's fine gold, collect every last crumb. It's not even real flour anymore, just the chalky residue of what once was. But with a little water, some salt, and imagination, it might become something that vaguely resembles food. The truth is, you're learning that survival isn't about meals anymore, it's about illusions. When you mix that flour dust into a paste and fry it on the stove, the smell isn't pleasant. It's bitter, burnt, almost sour. But the hiss of batter hitting hot iron makes your mouth water anyway. You break the flat cake in 2, share it, chew slowly, and swallow even slower. No talking during meals. No one wants to acknowledge how bad it's gotten. You've started grinding anything you can get your hands on. Corn meant for planting, not eating. Barley, oats, even dried grass. It's all fair game now. You use a coffee grinder with a broken handle, or crush it by hand with a rock and an old metal bowl. The resulting flour is gritty, full of husks and splinters, but you mix it into whatever you can. One time, you catch yourself chewing and feel something sharp. You spit out a pebble, laugh, swear, then keep eating. And flavour? Forget it. Everything tastes the same now, dry, bland, and necessary. You'd trade a month's rations for butter, or a piece of dried apple, or one of those thick molasses cookies from back in town, the kind the storekeeper used to keep in a jar on the counter. You dream about it more often than you'd care to admit. Sometimes, you wake up with your jaw sore, realising you were chewing in your sleep. There's a kind of homespun chemistry that takes over now. You've read, or heard, about folks using bark tea to keep their bellies full. Slippery elm, if you can find it, turns gelatinous when boiled and tricks the body into feeling fed. A couple of neighbours are rumoured to be cooking dried animal hides into broth. Boil long enough, skim the hair, and it becomes something thick enough to eat. Maybe even nutritious, depending on how old the hide is. The line between medicine and madness has gotten thin, and still, some refuse to compromise. You hear of one old-timer who keeps his last sack of seed wheat stashed under the floorboards, won't touch it, says it's for spring planting. That man hasn't eaten in 2 days. His wife has gone silent. People wonder how long he'll hold out before burying the dream of spring and boiling that sack down into soup. It's easy to sit by the fire and wonder how your great-grandparents would have handled this. Harder to remember that you are the great-grandparents now. No one's coming to save you. Not soon, anyway. You've crossed the threshold where resilience starts to look like madness, and every decision feels like a test. Eat the seed grain or starve with principle. Burn the heirloom chair or freeze with dignity. The frontier makes a philosopher out of you, whether you want it to or not. There's a boy in the next county over, at least that's what someone said, who carved a spoon out of a fence post just to feel like he had a proper utensil. They say he eats pine needle soup with it, every night, by lantern light. You can't tell if the story's true, but you like it, so you keep repeating it. It's funny what passes for hope these days. Of course, not everyone is scraping the bottom just yet. There's always that one family who somehow stockpiled better than the rest. Maybe they were lucky, maybe they were paranoid, maybe they just had more money. Either way, they're the ones still eating dried apples and occasional bacon slices. If you're on speaking terms, you might get a scrap of jerky or a biscuit. If not, well, you try not to look toward their house when the wind shifts and carries the smell of meat your way. Inside your own four walls, life has turned into a carefully choreographed ritual. Every meal is timed. Every ember is saved. Leftovers aren't a concept. They're sacred. You scrape plates so clean they don't need washing. Dishes only get cleaned once a day, using melted snow and a sliver of lye soap so thin it bends when you touch it. Water itself has to be hauled in bucket by bucket, melted on the stove, then rationed like liquor in a dry county. The days are shorter now, or maybe it just feels that way. You try to work, to move around and stay warm. You patch clothes with twine, boil scraps of cloth to soften them into rags. Someone suggests making soup from newspaper ink. You don't know if they're joking. Once in a while you venture out to check on a neighbour. It takes an hour to go half a mile. You walk over snowdrifts as tall as houses, the ground completely gone beneath you. The wind cuts across your face like a whip. When you get there, if you get there, you knock hard and wait. Always wait. People are jumpy. Then the door opens, and it's someone you've known for years, suddenly looking 10 years older, hollow cheeks, soot-streaked face, the smell of old sweat and wood smoke. They smile anyway, because it means you're both still alive. You sit by their stove for a while, exchange weather rumours, maybe even split a meal. Half a biscuit, a few spoonfuls of potato peel stew, or something that used to be cabbage. You talk about trains, always the trains. Any word from the station? Any smoke on the horizon? The answer is always no. Scholars later debate whether the settlers should have seen it coming. Some point to the early October storm as a warning shot. Others argue that even seasoned native tribes were caught off guard, their mobility hampered by an unusually wet summer and early snow. Some settlers had options, friends to stay with further south, or the means to pack up and flee. But most stayed. Pride, stubbornness, or just the cold truth. There was nowhere else to go. Even now you don't think about leaving. You're too far in. You've spent years building this place, ploughing this land, raising that sagging fence line by hand. You can't walk away from it just because winter decided to turn mean. Instead, you do what everyone else is doing. You get up in the morning, you breathe fog into your scarf, you grind a handful of whatever's left into a meal, and you whisper, once more, that quiet prayer for the train whistle. Maybe tomorrow, it's breakfast, or what passes for it now, and you're chewing on something that used to be food. A piece of flatbread so hard it could double as a roof shingle. You dunk it in your tea, which is more snowmelt than anything else, boiled with a few stray seeds you found in the bottom of a feed sack. It's bitter and gritty, but warm. That's what matters now. Warm. By now, the flour's long gone. The corn's gone too. All that's left is what was never meant to be eaten. Seed grain, tucked away in burlap sacks. You stare at it for days before you give in. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll save some for planting. But when hunger presses in, soft promises turn hard fast. You grind it in small batches with a metal meat grinder clamped to the table. It squeals and wobbles with each crank, scattering bits of precious grain dust across the tabletop. You scrape up every flake with your fingernail. The bread you make from it is bad. Not just bad like stale or bland. It tastes like punishment. Gritty. Oily. There's a strange sharpness to it that makes your teeth ache. Your stomach protests after every bite, but you force it down. You remind yourself that pioneers did this before, that people have lived through worse. Whether that's true doesn't matter. The lie is keeping you alive. One neighbour tried grinding grass seed. Another, some sort of wild weed they found under a windblown patch of earth. The results are unpredictable. Some taste like dirt. Some cause vomiting. One man, they say, made something that sent him into a fever dream for 2 days, talking to people who weren't there, sweating through his blankets while the wind howled outside. His wife says he woke up clearer than he'd been in years. Other folks say she's just covering for the fact he went a little funny. You hear stories, lots of them, about people cooking leather shoes into soup, about folks boiling wallpaper to suck nutrients from the paste. You don't know what's real and what's just the desperate imagination of the frozen. Either way, it keeps conversation going in the evenings when you're all wrapped in quilts, watching the stove flicker like it's the only moving thing left on Earth. Your own recipes have become more creative by necessity. Last week you made a pudding from water, a pinch of salt, and a bit of wild honey someone gave you back in September. You thickened it with pine pitch and served it in a broken teacup. You ate it slowly like it was custard. Someone cried a little. You all pretended not to notice. The cow in the barn has stopped giving milk. She's as miserable as you are, maybe more. Her coat is ragged from rubbing against the walls of her tiny shelter, and you've started bringing her handfuls of dried weeds. Again, not meant for consumption. You keep a fire going in her stall at night, fed with leftover corn cobs, broken tool handles, whatever wood you can spare. It's a weird thing, protecting an animal that's supposed to feed you, but you need her, not just for milk, for company, for sanity. You start bringing her inside the house during storms, not the whole way, just into the mudroom. It's warmer there. She doesn't complain. She stands in the corner, steaming like a kettle, eyes half closed, swaying on her feet. Her body heat takes the edge off the cold. The smell? Unpleasant. Strong. But you don't mind anymore. It's life. You'll take it. Other families do the same. In town, they've moved goats into the church basement, chickens into the schoolhouse. There's a story about one family who brought 2 pigs into the parlour and wrapped them in old quilts. They snorted and rooted around the woodpile, ate crusts off the floor. When spring finally came, they were the only animals in the county that hadn't frozen or starved. These days, taste is irrelevant. Texture is a luxury. You eat what your hands can make. You boil the same root 3 times and still save the water. You chew slowly, hold it in your mouth as long as you can, trying to fool your brain into thinking there's more coming. Somewhere deep in a drawer, wrapped in cloth and string, you've got a jar of jam. Just one. A gift from last summer, unopened. You look at it sometimes. You almost opened it last week when your cousin's boy was sick. Feverish, lips cracked. But he pulled through. Now the jam stays put. Maybe for Christmas. Maybe not even then. You're starting to wonder what event is special enough to be worthy. Every day brings a new decision about what to eat. Or not. And more often, you choose not. You skip breakfast to make dinner possible. You let the children eat first. You take smaller portions, chew longer, tell yourself you're not hungry. And it works, at least for now. Of course, everyone's talking about how long this can last. There's speculation, always. Just a few more weeks. The mailman said March looks promising. Someone heard birds last night. But the reality is more uncertain than ever. There's no calendar you can trust anymore. Just the way your hands shake when you try to lift a kettle, or how your pants keep slipping off your hips. That's your new clock, the shrinking of your own body. There's debate later about how healthy the average frontier settler was during the long winter. Some historians argue that despite the starvation, people were incredibly tough, lean, hardened, naturally resistant to the cold and stress. Others say malnutrition left them walking ghosts by spring, brittle-boned and sickly, with hair falling out in clumps. Honestly, you believe both. You feel both. Strong in the morning, delirious by dusk, it comes and goes. But the worst part of eating like this, living like this, is the memory of what used to be. The orchard out east, the buttermilk biscuits your mother made, peaches. Oh, peaches. You used to eat them fresh, juice dripping down your chin, pit clutched in your palm like treasure. Now you'd give anything for the sticky sweetness of that moment, and maybe one day you'll taste it again. But not today. Today you gnaw on seed bread and chew like it's your job. You sip pine tea and pretend it's wine. You throw nothing away. You salvage everything. You eat. You live. You wait. The moment the cow walks into the kitchen, You know your life has crossed into a realm you never imagined. Her hooves clop against the wooden floorboards, tentative but surprisingly polite, and she stops just shy of the stove like she knows better than to knock over the kettle. You clear a space in the corner and lay down old quilts and a torn feed sack. She sighs, yes, sighs, and settles in as if this is perfectly normal. It kind of is now. You'd already been thinking about it for weeks. The barn was barely holding. You had to dig it out more than once, shovel the roof clear after every storm, and even then, it creaked and groaned like a dying ship in a frozen sea. The wind slipped through the gaps in the boards, cutting straight into your cow's hide. Her breath came out in short, laboured puffs. You couldn't lose her. She was all that stood between your family and the abyss of no milk, no butter, and no hope. So now, she lives with you. You keep her in the kitchen during the worst of it, next to the stove where it's warmest. She doesn't complain. And truth be told, neither do you. Her body heat helps, more than you expected. It's like sharing a space heater with 1,200 pounds of quiet, living warmth. The smell is present, strong, a heavy mix of wet fur, manure, and something wild. But after a day or two, it fades into the background, just another layer of life in the layered stink of survival. She's not the only guest. In the next homestead over, you hear they've got chickens roosting on their mantle. Down the road, a goat lives in a pantry. Somewhere near Sioux Falls, someone's brought in 2 sheep and a piglet and keeps them behind a curtain in the parlour. Nobody judges anymore. You just nod. You understand. It gets strange in here sometimes. One morning, the cow licks your arm as you pour water into a cracked dishpan, and you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's the first time anything has touched you with kindness in weeks. Another time, you sit beside her and lean your head against her side just to feel something breathing. She blinks slow and heavy, as if she knows you're unravelling. You talk to her sometimes in low tones, not full conversations, not at first, but questions mostly. Think the snow's stopping? You going to give us some milk today? And eventually you start saying more. Memories, jokes, prayers. She listens the way only animals can, unbothered, present, unblinking. You ration her feed carefully. She's been eating straw and dried leaves, even bits of last year's thatch roof. It keeps her alive, but barely. Her ribs are sharp beneath her coat now, and her milk's thinning out. Still, you manage to get a pint a day, maybe less, and you treat it like gold. You don't drink it fresh. You mix it with flour dust or pour it over boiled roots to make a kind of stew, just enough to smooth the edges. One afternoon the wind dies down and the sun pushes through, faint but real. You pull open the door and stand in the light for just a second. The cold hits hard, but the brightness, oh, the brightness, makes your eyes water. You call it spring in jest, but your heart wants to believe. The cow noses the doorway behind you, sniffing the outside like a scent she remembers from a dream, but you slam the door shut. Not yet. You've seen what false hope can do. Inside, everything smells like smoke, animal and boiled cloth. The walls are streaked with soot. Icicles hang from the beams overhead, formed from breath and rising steam. Every few hours you tap them down so they don't fall and shatter on someone's head. It's not a home anymore, it's a survival chamber. At night you sometimes hear your cow shifting in her sleep. The sound of her tail slapping against the floor, the faint groan of her bones, even the weird rumble in her stomach. It's oddly comforting. The stove pings as it cools. You lie awake listening, hands under your arms, feet curled up tight. You can't feel your toes. You're not sure if you should be worried, or if it's just normal now. It's not like you haven't heard stories of animals and people sheltering together. In the old countries, peasants often lived under the same roof as their livestock. Heat rises, after all. It was practical, efficient, and maybe a little humbling. But on the prairie, where pride can be fatal, humility becomes its own kind of wisdom. You wonder sometimes what it would be like to show this scene to someone back east. A polished gentleman in a top hat maybe, who'd handed out pamphlets encouraging people to go west and make a new life. You imagine him stepping inside your little kitchen, boots sinking in cow manure, staring slack-jawed at the sight of your guest chewing cud beside the stove. You'd hand him a tin cup of weak tea and ask him if this was the American dream he'd pictured. He wouldn't last a day. There's no official rule for what's happening here. No newspaper advice column titled, "How to Coexist with a Bovine in Your Cooking Area." But it works. Somehow. You keep the cow alive. She keeps you warm. Her milk keeps your children going. You give her the last crust of bread, bits of rag, weeds pulled from under the eaves. It's not ideal. It's not even reasonable. But it's real. Later, people would debate the psychological toll of this kind of winter. They'd argue over the frontier's effects on the human mind. Cabin fever, isolation-induced hallucinations. They'd call it prairie madness, and say it especially struck women left alone too long in the snow. But it wasn't just women. It was anyone with too many walls, too much wind, and too few warm bodies. Even now you feel it. The creeping dread, the need to do anything just to prove you still exist. And then you look at your cow, standing steady, chewing with methodical calm, and you breathe easier. She doesn't panic, she doesn't complain, she just is. You think maybe that's the secret. You wake early the next morning to her snuffling softly beside the stove. You pour water, check her hooves, pat her shoulder, and feel, for just a second, that this world you're living in, strange as it is, might just carry you through another day. You've stopped calling it school. At this point, no one even pretends anymore. The books are still there, spines cracked, pages curled with damp, but they sit unused on the little shelf near the stove. The children don't ask about lessons, and you don't offer. What's the point of arithmetic when the only numbers that matter are how many biscuits are left and how many logs you've got to burn before nightfall? Still, the children need something. Some way to tell that the world hasn't entirely folded in on itself. So, you shift your expectations. You teach in other ways. You show them how to keep the fire going with less wood, how to roll snow into a ball to melt it faster, how to spot the different types of ice, clear and brittle, cloudy and soft. You let them help mix the strange new bread, teach them how to stir without wasting, how to scrape the bowl clean with the edge of a spoon. These are lessons now. Survival as curriculum. But what really fills the long nights is storytelling. It starts by accident. One evening, while the wind screeches across the prairie like a banshee, the youngest curls up in your lap, wide-eyed and jumpy. To calm them, you start talking. Just nonsense at first. Something about a talking snowshoe and a brave little sparrow who rides the wind like a ship. But they listen. Truly listen. Eyes locked on yours. Breathing quiet and still. You feel the moment when fear shifts into curiosity. That's when the stories begin in earnest. You tell them about your own childhood, about the time a thunderstorm split the old oak in half, and you thought lightning had a name. You tell them about the first time you saw the ocean, how the waves roared like this wind but smelled of salt and freedom. You tell them about the stars, even though they haven't seen them in months. And then they begin to tell stories too, small ones, silly ones. One tale about a chicken who walks through snow so deep it comes out cooked. Another about a sled made from a coffin that only works if you tell it a secret first. You don't correct them. You don't laugh. You nod, ask questions, urge them on. Imagination is a precious resource now, maybe the rarest thing in the house. You start to recognize the patterns. The wind screams loudest at night, so that's when the tales get more dramatic. Wild-eyed bandits in the mountains, wolves that can speak Latin, a girl who outsmarts a blizzard by singing to it until it melts. The stories become ritual, a way to make sense of the howling void outside your walls, a way to replace silence with sound. In many ways, you've become a sort of village elder, even if your village is just one family huddled under quilts. You recite parables, memories, jokes. You make up stories about the moon getting stuck in the trees and needing a shove to get free. The children whisper the endings to each other before bed like protective spells. Someone once said that stories are how humans survive the things they can't explain. Hunger, loss, cold that never ends. Maybe that's why, in the darkest stretch of this winter, you begin to rely on them more than food. You also pull out the Bible now and then, or whatever book you can find. Some pages have water damage, and a few have been torn to start kindling fires in the early days, when you thought it wouldn't matter. Now every remaining page feels sacred. You read slowly, voices low, savouring each sentence. Even the oldest children lean in, lips moving silently as they follow along. Some evenings you assign each person a story duty. They have to tell one new tale by the end of the night. Doesn't matter what it's about. It can be real or imagined. Some of the stories come out as quiet reflections. A boy telling about a horse he once rode so fast it outran a storm. Others are ridiculous, like the tale of a potato who becomes mayor of a snowbound town. Everyone laughs too hard, wheezing through cracked lips, clutching their ribs. Laughter feels like a luxury. You let them take their time with it. The house grows more cramped with every passing week, more ragged, more smoky. The windows are sealed with rags now, and icicles hang from the ceiling like the teeth of a frozen beast. Still, amid the groans of the stove and the creaks of the walls, the voices keep rising. You remember a story someone once told you about an Inuit village where every storm was named like a person. The idea stuck with you. You try it now. You name the blizzards as they come. Old Nelly, Bad Jack, Silent Thomas. It gives them shape, makes them less monstrous. The kids pick up on it too. They pretend to leave offerings, a crust of bread, a folded sock, to appease the storm spirits. It's half game, half ritual. You let them do it. Every now and then, in the middle of a story, the fire goes out, or a gust of wind rattles the house so hard that everyone jumps. The spell breaks for a moment. You're reminded where you are, what's really happening. But the story continues, it always does. That's the rule now. If you can finish your story, the night can't win. There's a scholar debate about whether frontier children had better imaginations than modern ones. Some say isolation and hardship force creativity to the surface. Others argue it was escapism, pure and simple. But when your child spins a tale about a mouse that rides a snowflake like a sled down the side of the moon, you don't analyse it. You just listen. Because when the world outside is buried in ice and white silence, stories are the only thing that feel alive. They're the fire you can't run out of. They cost nothing and give everything. And in this house, where school is a memory and meals are thinner than dreams, the stories are what's keeping you all human. You settle in that night, wrapped in every blanket you own, your cow breathing softly in the kitchen, your children curled beside you. The wind roars, but inside there's a whisper of something stronger, and it begins. Once upon a time. You lose track of what day it is, or maybe it's the week. The calendar on the wall, just a hand-drawn sheet you made months ago, no longer makes sense. The pencil marks blur together, smudged by smoke and moisture and your own uncertain fingers. You try to count the days since the last letter came, or the last time the sun peeked through the clouds. But it's like trying to count the grains in a sack of flour that's already been eaten. Gone. Time in this kind of winter stretches like taffy. Hours melt into each other. The sun rises without much conviction, skimming low across the sky, then disappears like it regrets showing up. You light the lamp earlier each evening, but it's never really bright inside. The snow around your house filters everything into a weird blue haze, as though you're living at the bottom of a frozen sea. Your pocket watch froze in December. You set it near the stove, hoping the warmth would coax it back to life, but now it just ticks once every few hours, like it's given up the will to keep going. You used to wind it every morning, part of the old rhythm, wake, eat, check the time. Now it's just another relic on the shelf beside a cracked teacup, and the wooden spoon you use to knock icicles off the rafters. You try to divide the day by chores. Morning, melt snow, stoke the fire, feed the cow, ration food. Afternoon, check the walls for cracks, dig out the air tunnel, count the potatoes, again. Evening, eat, if there's anything. Tell a story. Try to sleep. The problem is the days don't cooperate. They slip sideways. Sometimes the sun doesn't come out at all, and you wake up feeling like it's dusk. Sometimes it's so bright from the snow glare, it feels like noon for hours, but the fire still dies just as fast. The children stop asking what day it is. At first, they asked every morning. Is it Sunday? Is it Christmas? Is it spring? You'd say something kind, vague, hopeful, but now you just nod, or say maybe, or soon. They nod back, solemn and accepting, as if it's not really a question anymore, just a kind of prayer. You try to mark time in other ways. Icicle growth, the shifting draft near the back door, the creak in the floor that's grown louder. You can tell it's been a long time since the last letter arrived, because the pile of old ones has been reread so many times the corners are soft. You measure days by stories now. The night of the dancing bear tail, the day of the tin pot hero, that one storm when we sang about biscuits. They start to blur. But in a strange way it helps. You're not counting down to anything. You're just being. There's a pocket of snow in the hallway that never melts. You kick it with your boot each morning to check how soft it is, how much has crept in during the night. You start thinking of it as a calendar. When the snow stops appearing, maybe spring is closer, you don't tell anyone that. It's your private superstition, one of many. Sometimes you sleep during the day, or try. Other times you're up all night, stirring the fire, walking circles around the stove, checking on the cow, listening to the wind. Your internal clock is fried. There are nights when you're sure it must be morning, your stomach growling like a bear, your body aching with fatigue, and then you look out the little peephole you dug through the snowbank and see only blackness. Still night. And there are days, stranger still, when it feels like you're the one frozen in place, while the rest of the world keeps spinning. You stare at a wall for so long it begins to breathe. You hear ticking that isn't there. A floorboard creaks and you jump like a gunshot went off. In one moment of odd clarity you take an old tin can, punch a hole in the bottom, and make yourself a kind of makeshift hourglass. You fill it with coarse meal, precious stuff, and let it sift out slowly. The children watch it, fascinated as if it really matters. You tell them, when this is empty, we'll start dinner. They take turns flipping it. Meal falls like pale sand. It's completely inaccurate, wildly inefficient, but it gives shape to the shapeless. Not all of the settlers kept their grip on time. You heard about a man in Brookings who tried to create a full 24-hour schedule in his cabin. Bells for mealtime, rest periods, church, and even a pretend school hour. It lasted a week before the Bells drove his wife to bury them in a snowbank. Then there's the family out west who used a deck of playing cards as a calendar. Every day they burned one card in the stove. When they reached the Queen of Hearts, they declared it Spring's Eve and opened a window. Snow poured in. That story might not be true, but like most stories out here, that hardly matters. There's an open debate among historians about the effects of these long, lightless days on the mind. Some say the frontier settlers developed their own internal rhythms, a kind of mental clock adjusted to the prairie's harshness. Others argue they simply endured a low, constant madness that they hid behind routine and ritual. You can't say for sure. But you do know that when the light slants differently across the stove one afternoon, and your shadow stretches out just a bit longer than yesterday, you notice, your body notices, a tiny hopeful itch. But the next day it's gone again. The sky returns to its dull grey. The wind picks up. Time slips back into its shapelessness. Still, you mark the wall with a piece of charcoal, just in case that shift meant something. Your cow shuffles in her sleep. The children whisper a bedtime story in the corner, laughing softly at the part where the snowman builds a fire to warm himself. You smile. You close your eyes. You don't know what day it is, but you're here. And for tonight, that's enough. It begins as a low moan. Not human, not animal. Something bigger. You've heard wind before, plenty of it. But this is different. You're standing near the stove, pouring what might generously be called soup into tin bowls, when the sound builds outside. It's like the sky tearing open in slow motion. You stop mid-ladle, everyone does. Even the cow lifts her head and freezes. Then the house shudders. You've been through blizzards already. This isn't your first storm, but the way this one hits, it's like the wind has fists. It slams into the sod walls and the roof with such violence that snow falls from the rafters like dust from a collapsing ceiling. The windows, already half frosted over, shriek in their frames. You grab the nearest child by the collar and pull them back from the wall just as the shutters clatter against their latches. Someone lets out a low curse. Maybe it's you. The room dims instantly. Outside, day turns to night in seconds. The sky goes white, not with light, but with solid snow. Not flakes, but sheets. Curtains. It's not falling. It's flying. Sideways and upward and in circles, so thick that even if you dared open the door, you'd see nothing but a wall of white. The wind is screaming now, so loud it drowns out everything else. Voices, footsteps, thought. You scramble to reinforce the door, shoving a crate against it, then a stool, then whatever else you can grab. You check the chimney for blockages. You huddle everyone close. You yell, but your words barely carry. The blizzard has moved into the walls now, into the bones of the house. It shakes the place with every gust. Not a gentle rattle. No, this is the kind of shaking that makes you wonder if the roof is about to lift off entirely and sail away into the void. Outside, the snow doesn't fall like it used to. It pelts, stings, screams. It rushes around corners and into gaps like a living thing, furious and hungry. You've patched every crack a dozen times, but still the cold finds you. It snakes in through the tiniest gaps, sharp as broken glass. You can feel it in your teeth, in your skull. Inside, the cow stomps, nervous. She moos once, loud and panicked. You hush her, stroke her side, try to settle her, but your hands are shaking too. Not from fear, though that's part of it, but from cold. Real cold. The kind that steals your breath just by thinking about going outside. The storm doesn't last hours, it lasts days. By the second day, the snow has swallowed the windows entirely. You can't even see the faint glow anymore. The only light in the house comes from the lantern and the stove. You burn through wood faster than ever. You use fence posts, old stools, anything that will catch fire. You keep the stove hot not because it's comfortable, but because it's necessary. Without it, you'd all be frozen statues by morning. The walls grow wet and then freeze again. Ropes of ice curl down from the corners. Your breath hangs in the air like fog and then vanishes into the white. And still the blizzard howls. You start to forget what silence was like. You cover your ears to try and mute it, but the wind keeps screaming right through your skull. It changes pitch, now high and shrill, now low and rumbling. It never stops. You try to sleep but dream only of running through snow you can't escape. You wake up gasping, covered in frost, and reach for the stove like it's a lifeline. You try to keep things normal, sort of. You still tell stories at night, but they're shorter now, shakier. The children don't ask for silly ones anymore. They ask for ones about warmth, about spring, about cake. One girl whispers to you, "Tell the one about the butter churn again." And you do, even though it's not really a story. Just a memory of golden cream and a wooden paddle and the way it sloshed when you turned it. They listen like it's gospel. On the third day, something strange happens. The cow stops mooing. She just stands there, eyes half-lidded, steaming in the dim light. You check her water. It's frozen. You crack the surface, melt it near the stove, bring it back. She drinks slowly. You run your hands along her side and wonder how much longer she can keep going. How much longer any of you can. You hear through the blizzard, or maybe from your own mind, a faint sound like bells. Not the jingle of sleigh bells, but something more hollow, echoing. You mention it once out loud, and everyone looks at you like maybe you've cracked. You drop it, but you swear you heard something. There are frontier stories, old ones, about the wind talking during the worst storms, voices carried through the snow, people calling for help who aren't really there, ghosts, spirits. You always figured those were tales told by folks who'd had too much solitude. But now, holed up in your shaking, half-frozen house, you're starting to understand. You've had to hang a quilt across the front door. Snow was seeping through the edges like mist. You had a nightmare last night that the snow came inside and swallowed you in your sleep. Soft, suffocating, silent. You woke up coughing and gasping for breath, heart pounding like a drum. The fire's burning low. You've started burning the bookcase, one shelf at a time. No one talks much anymore. The cold's too sharp, the wind's too loud. But you glance around, and you know the others are still there. That matters. You're still here, and eventually, the wind begins to fade. Not all at once. But by the fourth morning, the house stops shaking. The howling dips into a moan, then a whisper, and finally, a silence that hurts your ears because you'd forgotten what silence really sounds like. You peel back the curtain and try to open the door. It doesn't budge, not even an inch. You dig, you chip away. It takes hours, but finally you crack open a tunnel, stick your head out, and see nothing but snow. A wall of it, as tall as you, maybe taller. The house is buried, but the sky above is clear, a pale blue. You cry when you see it. The first thing you do when you see the sky again is cry, quietly, so no one notices. Not because you're embarrassed, but because it hits you all at once how starved you've been for colour. For something that isn't white or grey or blackened wood. That thin strip of blue above the snow tunnel you've carved feels like a miracle. Like you just cracked open the top of the world and found proof that life still exists outside this frozen cocoon. But that blue sky doesn't mean warmth. Not yet. In fact, it's somehow even colder now. Without the clouds to hold in what little heat the earth has left, the temperature drops to new depths. The snow underfoot creaks like it's made of glass. Your breath doesn't just fog, it crystallizes around your face in a beard of frost. Inside the house, you start noticing your own tears freeze mid-fall. And the worst part? The firewood is gone. Not getting low, not better cut back. Gone. You burned the last of the split logs last week. You burned the shelf, then the back of a chair, then the drawer from the table. Even the broom handle went up in smoke. Now all that's left are things that weren't meant to burn and weren't meant to be gone. You eye the barn ladder hanging on the wall, then the crib in the corner no one's used in 2 winters. It's a silent vote, decided without words. You dismantle them one piece at a time. You strip the furniture down like a carcass. The house begins to look skeletal. Bare bones of what once was a home, now hollowed out for heat. There's no guilt anymore. No hesitation. This is survival math. If it burns, it goes in the stove. One family you know tore up their floorboards, pulling up one every day like a terrible advent calendar. Another's burning fence rails, the ones that mark their land when they first staked claim. You tell yourself they'll rebuild it come spring, but deep down you know that might be a lie to stay sane. You find yourself looking at strange things, wondering, will that burn? The wooden handle of your knife, the spare boot that doesn't match anything, a broken yoke. You scrape at it with a hatchet, break it down to splinters, feed it in piece by piece. You ration the heat like food now. The stove only burns in short bursts. One fire in the morning to thaw fingers, one in the evening so you don't fall asleep frozen. The rest of the day you huddle. You bundle in every layer you own, press together like sardines, wrap in blankets so stiff with frost they crack when unfolded. Still, it's not enough. The cold creeps in anyway. Some nights you wake with your feet numb and you press them against someone else's body to share what little warmth remains. No one minds. The rules are gone. Bodies are heaters, and shame has no place in a winter like this. And yet, it's not just your house. It's the whole territory. Across Dakota, Nebraska, and Minnesota, families are feeding stoves with anything they can pry loose. Churches are handing out hymnals as kindling. Schools are closed, not just for the cold, but because no one has fuel left to heat a classroom. Even the post office in town shut its doors after burning the sorting tables. A widow on the edge of town, they say, burned her husband's coffin. Never used, just sitting in the shed since autumn. She didn't cry when she did it. Didn't blink, just dragged it inside, sawed it into planks and fed it to the flames. She said it kept the fire alive for 3 days, the best 3 days she'd had since October. That story spreads fast. You hear another tale about someone who started burning their books. Slowly, reluctantly, like killing friends one by one. A few kept a journal page to save. Most didn't. It's hard to justify the future when the present keeps trying to kill you. In your own home, you make rules. No full fires during daylight, just coals. You light the stove long enough to warm up meals, then let it die down. You sleep around it like an animal den, pushing up close, adding body heat to its fading glow. It's not comfort, it's survival choreography. Every now and then, the fire goes out completely. You stare at the black stove, wondering if you'll ever hear that first spark again. You hold your breath while you coax it, scraping together dry bits of cloth, crumbs of resin, anything that might catch. When it flares back to life, everyone in the room exhales at once, like they've all been holding the same prayer. Historians still argue over whether this level of wood scarcity was avoidable. Some say the railroads should have delivered more coal before the storms cut them off. Others blame the settlers, claiming they didn't stockpile enough in the fall. But even the best prepared families found themselves running low. You couldn't predict a 7-month winter. No one could. It wasn't just long, it was relentless. You remember the day you realised it wasn't just snow that would kill you, it was the cold. The slow, grinding, patient cold. It doesn't charge in like a wolf, it seeps, slips, settles, and it waits. It waits while you scavenge the rafters for anything dry enough to burn. It waits while you weigh whether to use the family chest your grandfather made as fuel. It waits while you sit by the stove, watching flames lick at something that used to mean something. A cradle, a doorframe, the wooden box where you kept letters. It's not a bonfire, it's a slow cremation of your past. And when the fire dies down each night and the darkness creeps back in, you wrap yourself tighter in your blankets, listen to the hiss of the final ember, and whisper what's become a nightly ritual. Just get us through tonight. It's a quiet sound at first, just a faint hiss, like the whisper of a kettle left too long on the back burner. You don't think much of it. You're half asleep, back pressed to the wall, legs curled tight beneath a quilt that smells of smoke and sweat and everything this winter has taken from you. The fire's low, not out, but barely clinging. You've just burned the last spindle from the stair rail, and the heat hasn't reached past your boots. Then the hiss turns to a crack. You sit up fast. There's a smell. Sharp, bitter. Not the familiar scent of burning wood, but something more aggressive. Acrid. Chemical. You blink the sleep from your eyes and scramble toward the stove. Someone else is already there, throwing back the stove lid. Smoke billows out, thick and black, not rising up the chimney like it should. The flue is clogged. You move fast. You've practiced this. Everyone has. You grab a cloth and wet it with melted snow, press it to your mouth. Another grabs a broom handle to prod the chimney. You swing the stovepipe open and get hit with a burst of hot ash. It coats the walls, the floor, the cow, who's now moaning and shifting nervously, stamping her hooves. Her breath comes fast and hot, steam mixing with the smoke like ghosts crowding in. You can't get the flue clear. Whatever's in there is stuck. Maybe ice, maybe soot build-up, maybe both. And now the smoke's thickening. Your eyes burn. You drop to your knees, crawling across the floor, yelling for everyone to stay low. The smallest is coughing hard. Another is trying not to panic. You reach the front door and yank hard, forgetting for a moment that it's sealed with snow. Useless. The air tunnel you dug days ago has caved in. You have to act fast. You open the back window, just a sliver, enough to let the smoke drift out and the cold rush in. It's a terrible trade, but one you're forced to make. The heat you've hoarded all day vanishes in minutes. The air goes brittle. Your fingers ache. You don't know it then, but this is just the first chimney scare, the first of many. Over the next few weeks, fires become dangerous in a whole new way. You used to fear the cold. Now you fear the stove too. It's an awful choice. Freeze slowly or risk waking up to the roof on fire. The walls are coated in soot now. Everything is. Your skin, your clothes, your food. You try to clean with melted snow, but it never fully goes away. Your hands are black even after scrubbing. You catch yourself scratching soot from your scalp like dandruff. And there's the coughing, that deep rattling kind that doesn't go away. Not everyone has it, but those who do sound worse by the day, you start calling it chimney lung. No one laughs. You know of 2 people who didn't wake up last week. They had sealed their windows too tight to keep in heat, closed the flue too early, and died breathing their own fire. You keep the window cracked now, just a little, even when it means losing heat. You tuck blankets along the floor to block the worst of the drafts, but it's always a gamble. Warmth versus air, life versus sleep. The stove moans constantly. It groans and ticks and shifts as the metal expands and contracts. You learn to tell the difference between a normal pop and a warning crack. You're always listening. Even in your sleep, your ears are tuned to the stove. One night you find the youngest curled up beside it with a red patch across their cheek. They'd gotten too close, skin to metal. You treat the burn with snow, then wrap it in cloth soaked in tea. It'll scar. You try not to cry. The irony of all this isn't lost on you. The thing that was supposed to save you might end you if you're not careful. The stove is no longer a source of comfort. It's a weapon you've turned on yourself, cautiously, daily, praying it doesn't backfire. You try other ways to heat the house, ways you once thought were beneath you. You burn old cloth, pages from books, twisted bundles of straw. You rip out floorboards in the pantry. You burn dried manure from the cow, which crackles and stinks but burns hot. You feel pride and shame at once, breathing in that scent and knowing it's what's keeping you alive. Some settlers tried building outdoor fires and funneling the heat in through makeshift pipes. It rarely worked. One man set fire to his own dugout roof by accident. The snow had insulated the grass sod, but once the flames took, the roof collapsed. He survived, barely. His goats didn't. And there are the makeshift chimneys, crafted from barrels, stovepipes patched with soup cans, or even animal hides stretched to create flues. You've never seen such ingenuity, or such desperation. There's no blueprints for this kind of living, just trial and error and prayers that stick. The debate among the more fortunate, those further south or better supplied, has always been whether the settlers were too reckless with their fires. They should have known better, some say. They should have built smarter homes. But anyone out here knows that even the best chimney cracks under ice. Even the safest stove misbehaves when you're burning fence posts soaked with snowmelt and desperation. You post someone near the fire at all times now. Shifts day and night. You set rules. No wood that hisses, no stuffing the stove too full, and never close the damper without checking the smoke first. The cow even gets her own routine. You slide her away from the stove at night so she doesn't bump it in her sleep. And yet, despite all that, accidents still happen. A neighbour's chimney collapses under an ice dam. Another's flue freezes solid, sending black smoke back into the room. They dig a hole through the snowbank just to vent it. You admire their grit. You also fear it. On the worst nights, you start to dream of fire, not warmth, but flame, devouring everything. You wake up sweating despite the cold, clawing at the blankets. You check the stove, the walls, the ceiling. All fine, but the fear lingers. Even so, you keep lighting the fire, you have to, because when it works, it still gives you that flicker of life, that tiny orange glow reflected in every sooty face gathered around the stove, that hiss of boiling water, that crackle of burning twig, the illusion of control. And sometimes, in the stillness between storms, when the chimney pulls clean and the smoke dances upward into the frozen sky without resistance, you allow yourself one small luxury. You close your eyes, lean back, and breathe. The cold changes you. Not just the numbness in your hands or the way your toes have stopped responding entirely. It rewires how you move, how you think, how you even feel inside your own skin. It doesn't just freeze your breath, it freezes time, thought, and sometimes even the parts of you once thought untouchable, like joy or memory. You're not just in winter anymore, you're part of it. Your skin tells the story first. The cracks along your knuckles deepen until they split open, red and raw, and no matter how tightly you wrap them, they reopen with every chore. You wear mittens inside now, not because it's cute or folksy, but because your fingertips are beginning to blacken. You bite the skin off your lips just to feel something. One morning your ear stings so sharply you touch it and realise it's been frostbitten, inside the house. And yet, you keep going, because you have to. The children are quiet now. Not moody or petulant, just quiet. There's a kind of stillness in them that frightens you more than any storm. They've stopped complaining. That's not a good sign. You see them watching the icicles on the ceiling like they're waiting for something. Not out of wonder, more like calculation. A child stares at ice like that only when they're thinking about licking it just to feel cold in a new way. You start making little routines, even stricter than before. Wash with snow once a day, whether you feel like it or not. Rub feet. Massage hands. Eat something warm, no matter how small. You check for frostbite like it's a religious practice. Knees, toes, ears. You say it like a mantra while you do it. Your skin dries out, flakes off. You pick at it while staring into the fire. Everyone does. You start calling it snow rot, joking half-heartedly, but it's no joke when someone's finger won't stop bleeding, or when a child wakes up and can't bend their knee from swelling. There's no medicine. The salve ran out weeks ago. The last bit of liniment went to the cow's cracked udders. You smear bacon grease on burns now and wrap wounds in rags soaked in tea. That's all you've got left. And the smell? It's everywhere. That rank blend of unwashed bodies, old wool, sour milk, damp blankets, animal sweat, and soot. You don't notice it at first. Your senses dull with the cold, but then someone moves a curtain or lifts a coat and the air shifts. You catch a whiff and nearly gag. You don't say anything. No one does. Because what's the point? The air inside the house is dry, painfully so, despite the moisture clinging to the walls. Your nose bleeds constantly. You wake up with your tongue stuck to the roof of your mouth. Every cough feels like it might crack a rib. Every breath slices. You boil water constantly just to put a little humidity back into the room. It fogs the windows for a while, then freezes into patterns that look like feathers or fangs. Tempers flare, not in loud ways but sharp and quick. Snapping words, heavy silences, a slammed pan, the clatter of a ladle tossed too hard into the wash basin. You feel the tension rising like steam, trapped with no place to go. The cow picks up on it too. She stomps more, moos less. She's quieter, like the rest of you. She's still giving milk, but not as much. You talk to her in the early mornings, not for her benefit, but because she's the only one who doesn't argue back. There's a certain kind of look people get in a winter like this. Their cheeks hollow, eyes sink back into their sockets, their skin turns waxy, almost blue. You see it when you catch your reflection in a pan or the icy sheen of a window. You look like someone else. Everyone does. You remember what one old-timer called prairie skin, that leathery, wind-bitten face a person wears after too many years out here. But this is worse. This is winter face. No shine, no life, just grey. Somewhere near Yankton, a family reportedly started wrapping themselves in newspaper under their clothes. Not for reading, just insulation. You try it. It works, a little. When the pages crinkle under your arms, you feel oddly powerful. Then the ink runs onto your skin and you smell like soot and old news. You don't care. It's warm. You lose a fingernail, just one. It went black, then shriveled off while you were stirring a pot. You wrap the finger in cloth and didn't say a word. Later you find the nail near the fire and throw it into the stove like a sacrifice. You tell no one, not even yourself. The cow's tail is frozen at the tip. You wrap it with old socks, tie it gently, whisper apologies. She licks your shoulder and keeps chewing. She's still here. That's something. Scholars have argued for decades about whether the mental strain of winters like these was worse than the physical hardship. There's no agreement. Some point to journals filled with shaky handwriting, desperate prayers and rambling thoughts. Others argue it forged a kind of inner steel in the settlers, a stubbornness so deep it became their defining feature. But out here, in your bones, you know it isn't about strength or weakness. It's about duration. You can't muscle your way through a winter like this. You can't tough it out. You endure. You survive by becoming smaller, quieter, more careful. You trim away every part of yourself that doesn't serve the fire or the food. You become efficient, intentional, scarred. You no longer dream of spring. Not really. That feels too far off, too abstract. Instead, you dream of one warm bath, of air that doesn't burn, of a meal without splinters. You dream of a morning where you don't wake up dreading the air that will hit your face. One night, someone starts humming an old lullaby. It's barely audible over the wind, but you close your eyes and let it fill you. You don't remember the words, just the sound, just the feeling of something human floating above the animal grunts and stove clatter and the quiet scrape of skin against wool. It doesn't fix anything, but for the length of a breath you remember who you are. You hear him before you see him. A sharp knock, then another. Not frantic, just steady, rhythmic, like someone who knows if they stop knocking the wind might take them. You freeze in place, spoon halfway to your mouth, which is a miracle in itself considering the last time someone knocked was before Thanksgiving. For a moment, no one moves. Even the cow seems to pause mid-chew, ears twitching toward the sound. You blink, your mind refusing to believe it. There's no way someone's outside in this. No sane person, anyway. You glance toward the door, buried in snow to the top beam. It takes a second knock, then a third before you spring into motion. You crawl to the snow tunnel, what little of it remains after last week's storm tried to erase it. You dig fast, your hands already numb, clearing just enough to crack the door and let in a blast of frozen air. There he is, a shape coated in snow and ice, barely visible. You squint and the figure lifts an arm and waves weakly. You reach out, pull him in like you're hauling a sack of grain through a blizzard. His coat is stiff as armour, face nearly invisible under frost and scarf and goggles. He stumbles inside and collapses beside the stove without a word. You slam the door shut behind him and restuff the gaps with rags. Everyone stares, silent. The man peels back layers like a tree shedding bark. Coat, scarf, goggles, mittens. His skin underneath is flushed red from the cold, wind-chapped and raw. When he finally speaks, his voice is rough, shredded like a saw through dry pine. "Mail," he croaks, and you almost laugh. You're staring at a miracle. The mailman. You get him tea, or what passes for tea, and whatever you can spare for food. He eats with shaking hands, slow and grateful. When his fingers stop trembling, he reaches into a sack and pulls out a bundle of letters wrapped in oilcloth. A few are damp, the ink running, but it doesn't matter. You treat them like treasure. He gives you news from the outside world. Some you knew, some you didn't. The rail lines are still snowed under. No trains since October. Towns along the line are rationing salt pork and flour. A few general stores are handing out supplies by lottery. Others have closed altogether. He tells you people are burying firewood beneath haystacks now, trying to hide it from thieves. One man in Tracy is said to have built a stove out of bricks and animal fat. It works, the mailman shrugs, until it catches fire. You ask him where he came from. He says he's been riding between towns on snowshoes, delivering mail when he can. Sometimes he skis. Other times he walks, dragging a sled behind him with supplies. Hard part isn't the cold, he says. It's the silence. It makes you forget why you're walking. He's not young, mid-40s maybe, but the kind of wiry tough that winter can't scare off. His face is so weathered it looks carved. His boots are wrapped in canvas and twine, patched with fur scraps. He says he hasn't had dry socks since New Year's. He says it without bitterness. You wonder for a moment why. Why risk it? Why leave shelter just to carry a few scraps of paper across a frozen wasteland? He tells you, because people need to remember they're not alone. And you believe him. He stays the night, curled up near the stove like one of your own. In the morning, before the sun's even up, he suits back up and prepares to head out. You try to convince him to stay just one more day. He shakes his head. Still got 5 more stops, he says, and a storm's coming. You watch as he disappears back into the tunnel, into the pale morning light, a canvas sack slung over his shoulder, and snow already clinging to his coat. The house is silent again, but something's changed. You hold the letters in your lap, each one damp and creased, smelling faintly of frost and old paper. You read them slowly, like sacred text. One is from your cousin in St. Paul. She says they're burning crates from the railway yard and living on potatoes that taste like dirt. She says to write back, please write back, so she knows you're still alive. Another is from a friend who made it down to Nebraska before the first storm hit. It's dated December. He writes about mild winds, dry roads, and people playing cards outside. You laugh, almost bitterly. You don't even remember what dirt looks like. One letter, unsigned, says only, "We've lost 4, still holding. God help us." It's scrawled in pencil on the back of a church flyer. Some of the letters are just lists, names, towns, what's been lost. You scan them like you're reading obituaries. And yet, even these ghostly messages bring something with them. Proof. Connection. The outside world still exists. You're not a snowbound myth. Not yet. You gather the family and read the letters out loud. It becomes a new kind of story hour. The children listen wide-eyed to tales of rail towns buried to their steeples, of stores selling candles for $1 apiece, of neighbours sharing sugar like medicine. They ask questions. What's it like there? Will they come visit? Are they okay? You say yes, even when you don't know, because now they're listening again. The story of the mailman, yes, plural, becomes legend fast. The postman of the long winter, they'll be called. Men who strapped on snowshoes, wrapped their faces in scarves, and walked across a white desert to deliver scraps of hope. Some of them never made it. Frostbite, collapse, disorientation. But those who did, they became lifelines. Some travelled with dogs, others went alone. Some delivered nothing more than a name scribbled on a piece of bark, yet it was enough. Historians later argue whether it was bravery or madness. Who signs up to be the only thread tying together a scattered, frozen civilization? But you already know the answer. They weren't just delivering letters, they were delivering proof of life. And in this house, still half buried in snow, you hold that proof in trembling hands. There's a strange kind of wisdom animals carry in their eyes when the weather turns. A quiet, ancient knowledge that doesn't rely on calendars or almanacs or telegrams. Just instinct. You begin to notice it in your cow. She's restless in a way that has nothing to do with hunger or cold. She shifts her weight differently, breathes deeper, stares out the door as if she knows what's coming before you do. And she isn't alone. The chickens, those poor scraggly survivors, stopped laying weeks ago, and you figured they'd just given up. But now they start acting odd, pecking more aggressively, fluttering at shadows. They won't sleep on their roost anymore, but cluster in a corner like something out there is watching them. There's nothing out there, of course, just snow, just more white. But the animals disagree, and sure enough the sky changes. It's not a fast change. No sudden dark cloud or roaring wind, just a gradual thickening of the air, like the world is inhaling before a scream. The birds in town went silent 3 days ago, someone tells you. Horses refused to leave their stalls. A dog ran straight through a storm cellar door and wouldn't come out. And then the temperature drops. Not a few degrees. A full-body, gut-level drop. The kind of cold that makes your teeth ache from just breathing. You don't even need to check the thermometer. You feel it. Your cow begins pacing. You take it as a warning. Animals are smarter than you when it comes to weather. Always have been. You've heard stories all your life. How the horses stop pulling when the storm is close. How cattle turn their backs to the wind and huddle before the first flake falls. You used to think it was coincidence. Not anymore. You remember your father once saying, "When the barn gets quiet, run." So when your cow stops eating, you stop everything else. You go into full prep mode. Fast. You reseal the windows with anything you can find. Blankets, scraps of hide, canvas sacks from the flour that's long been eaten. You clear the stovepipe again, check the draft, bank the fire. The snow tunnel is already drifting over, even though there's no wind yet. That's how you know this one's going to be bad. You get water melting in every pot and pail. You gather extra cloth, stuff every crack in the door, even nail a quilt across the threshold. The children sense your urgency and go quiet. They help without asking. They've been here before. You hear a low groan from outside, not the wind, not yet, but the snow shifting, settling, like it's making room for more. And then your cow lets out a long, low sound, not frightened, not angry, just final, like she's resigned to it. She lies down near the stove and doesn't move again for hours. That's when the wind comes. It doesn't knock, it kicks. The first gust hits the house like a cannon blast. Everything rattles. The door bows inward for a second and you rush to brace it. The wind screams, not just whistling or howling, but screaming. A human sound, unnatural, furious. You feel it in your teeth. The animals knew. Outside, the world vanishes. There's no horizon, no sky, no sound but the shriek of the wind. It whips the snow into waves that crash invisibly against the side of your home. You can't see them, but you feel them. Each one hits like a battering ram. You swear you can hear nails loosening in the frame. The windows bow in just slightly, the glass bending like it wants to break. Inside, you huddle. All of you. Every blanket is in use. The cow's body heat is the only thing keeping the temperature above freezing. You feed the fire in short bursts, trying not to burn too fast, but you can't go without it. The cold eats into the house like it has teeth. The chickens shiver in their crate. The cow moans every hour or so, eyes closed, legs tucked under like she's trying to disappear into herself. There's nothing you can do but wait. This isn't your first blizzard, but it's the first where you don't move for 2 days straight. Literally. There's no point. No chores, no fresh air, no errands. The door is frozen shut. The windows are crusted over with so much snow and ice that they may as well be walls. The cow has stopped standing. You check her every few hours. She's breathing, but barely. You feed her warm water with a rag. When you try to stand, your knees crack like wood. Your feet are so stiff you don't know if they're cold or numb, or simply no longer yours. The children stop talking again. They just listen to the wind. Later, when the storm finally dies, and the world goes still again, you crawl through the snow tunnel to check the barn, not out of optimism, but obligation. You already know what you'll find. The barn roof has collapsed. The fence is gone. The drifts are as high as the eaves. You call for the horses out of habit. There's no answer, just the sound of your own breath. You go back inside, brush snow off your sleeves and say nothing. No one asks. You look over at the cow. She opens one eye. She's still here. For some reason, that undoes you. There's an old story someone once told you, maybe in town, maybe in a saloon, maybe from a book you burned months ago, about how animals can smell storms before they come. Not just cold, but the type of storm, the danger, the intent behind the wind. You believe it now. Because what else could have told her to huddle in place before the sky even shifted? What else made her lie still through the screaming, as if she knew movement would mean death? People underestimate animals, but out here, in this kind of winter, it's the humans who are fragile. The animals, they're the ones who've been surviving since before the first settler built his dream house on this frozen prairie. Your cow doesn't complain. She doesn't cry. She doesn't hope. She just knows, and you'd be a fool not to listen. You've been digging so long your arms go numb, not from the cold this time, but from the sheer repetition. Scoop, throw, scoop, throw. The snow isn't fluffy anymore. It's hardened, packed tight like concrete. Your shovel bites into it with a jolt, jarring up your shoulder. Sometimes it feels like you're not digging through it, but into it, like you're tunneling into some ancient glacier that's been here since the dawn of time. You're not even sure what you're digging for anymore. A path to the barn that's already collapsed, a tunnel to the well that froze solid weeks ago, or maybe just the need to do something. Anything. Sitting still too long makes your thoughts turn dark, so you dig. But regular shovels don't cut it anymore. Not in this stuff. You've already broken 2 handles, splintered a third, the iron one is too heavy, and the wood swells and warps after being left out too long, so you start inventing. You pull the head off an old hoe and nail it to a broom handle. It works, kind of. You find an old saw blade and rig it to a board to cut through the ice crust before you shovel it. Your hands blister fast, then callous over. You wrap them in rags to keep from tearing skin. You're becoming a snow engineer, a mad inventor with frostbitten fingers, and you're not the only one. Down the road, a neighbour has strapped the curved lid of a butter churn to a broomstick and is using it like a snowplane. Another family builds a sled using old cabinet drawers nailed to skis. One couple ties bedposts together with strips of leather and makes a toboggan. You hear of a man in Sioux Falls who fashioned a plough out of the front axle of a wagon and pulled it with his own sons when the horses died. People have stopped calling these things tools. Now they're lifelines. The snow doesn't just pile, it sculpts. After months of non-stop storms, it has transformed the prairie into something alien. There are no more roads, no fences, no visible markers of anything. Entire buildings are buried. You walk on top of houses now, unknowingly stepping across rooftops you once passed with a wave. You dig to your chicken coop and find only the tips of the posts. You try to locate the outhouse and have to guess by where the smoke from the house used to blow. Every hole you dig caves in. Every tunnel collapses. You reinforce them with boards, branches, whatever you can scrounge. And yet, you keep digging. Because under all this snow are your things, your life. Somewhere beneath the hard-packed drifts are your fence rails, your root cellar, the shed you built last July with blood and sweat and stubbornness. So you keep scratching and scraping and clawing, like a dog trying to find the last bone it buried before the world turned white. Sometimes you find something, sometimes you don't. The real miracle is that you're even able to do this. The cold should have frozen you still by now. But movement is warmth. You swing a shovel and sweat pools at the back of your neck, then freezes seconds later. Your coat stiffens with frost. Your breath forms a little fog cloud that settles in your scarf. Still, your core stays warm. You shovel not just for survival, but for sanity. There's an odd satisfaction to it, cutting through a drift and seeing the edge of the barn wall, revealing the curve of a wagon wheel, finding the stovepipe still poking out of a neighbour's house like a periscope from an underground bunker. Once you dig to the front step and find a cat, frozen, curled under the porch roof, snow blanketing it like a burial cloth. You say a small prayer and leave it where it lies. You can't afford sentimentality, but it stays in your mind. There's debate years later about just how much ingenuity the long winter wrung out of its victims. Some say it created the next generation of inventors and pioneers, people who, after surviving that kind of hardship, saw the world differently and never stopped solving problems. Others say it was desperation in disguise, that these inventions were just frantic acts of survival, nothing more. Maybe both are true. You start keeping a tool corner inside the house. The snow knives, the chisel broom, the chopped-down hoe, the coffee can scooper with a whittled stick for a handle. Each one handmade, crude, but necessary. You line them up by the door like weapons. The snow doesn't knock anymore. It sneaks, silently drifting into the tunnel, pressing against the doorframe, creeping under the eaves. You've given the snow character now. It's no longer just a thing. It's a presence, a foe. And the only way to fight it is with your makeshift arsenal of tools. Sometimes the work gets absurd. You find yourself digging a tunnel not because you need what's at the other end, but because you need to dig a tunnel. One goes to the barn ruins, another to the shed. You start on a third, curving along the backside of the house like a trench line in a war. The children crawl through them like foxes playing pretend. This one leads to the bakery, one says. That one goes to town. You don't stop them. Let them imagine. It's warmer in stories. You carve steps down into the snowbanks. You chisel ledges. At one point, you find yourself digging into a drift just to create a little shelter. A snow cave. You sit in it for a while, and it's surprisingly quiet. The snow muffles the wind. The air inside is cold, yes, but still peaceful. You could almost fall asleep in there. You don't. But the idea lingers. You even begin using the snow against itself, packing it into bricks and building walls around your entryways to act as windbreaks. A man in town reportedly used snow bricks to build a dome over his chimney, so the fire wouldn't be snuffed by the next blizzard. Someone else used snow to insulate their house better, digging a trench around the base and packing it with ice. You try it. It helps. You start calling one of your tools the snow knife. It's just a flat board sharpened at the edge, but the name gives it power. You carry it on your hip like it's a sword, slicing paths through the drifts like a warrior in some ridiculous frozen epic. You laugh at yourself, but the laughter helps too. The snow doesn't stop, but neither do you. You keep carving, keep chiseling, keep hacking away at this heavy white monster that tried to bury you. It hasn't won. Not yet. As long as you've got something to hold in your hand, something that cuts, scrapes, scoops, you've got a way forward, even if it's only a few feet at a time. You hear the story from a neighbour who stopped by on snowshoes, face red from the wind, scarf frozen stiff over his mouth. He doesn't say much, just shakes his head, peels off his mittens, and accepts a cup of hot water like it's whiskey. You wait for him to speak, knowing from the way he sits, heavy and slow, that he's carrying something heavier than his pack. "They found him 3 feet from his door," he says. No one replies. No one asks who. "Trying to get to the barn?" Still, silence. You all know what that means. You don't ask the details. You don't need them. Everyone knows that kind of death. Not grand or sudden, not heroic, just a quiet vanishing into the white, a life ended mid-step between here and there. That's what the long winter does. It doesn't always kill with drama. It kills with distance. A few feet too far, a few seconds too late. The man's name was Henry. You knew him only slightly. Built his sod house by the river. Had a good wife, 3 kids, a laugh like a chimney drawer. He'd made it through the first blizzards just like you. Stockpiling, rationing, digging. But then a string of bad luck. A sick cow. A frozen well. The kind of small disasters that pile up until they become one big one. And one morning, when the fire was down to coals and the children needed milk, he stepped outside during a lull. Not a storm, just a drift and a wind and a need. They say the snow blew in behind him and covered his tracks before he made it to the barn. He was gone an hour. His wife found him when she followed the rope line they'd strung between the house and the barn. One of those tricks folks started using when the snow made the world vanish. But the line had frozen stiff and snapped. 3 feet from the door. You don't cry, you don't even speak. You just stare at your hands for a while and think about how many times you've stepped out without a rope, or a plan, or a thought beyond get the water, or check the cow. You think about how easily it could have been you. The snow doesn't forgive, and the scary part is, you stop thinking of these deaths as tragedies. They're warnings now, markers, caution signs in the form of corpses. The people who die become lessons to the people who don't. You file it away. Never leave without a rope. Never trust the calm. Never count on the barn being close. You start looking at the door differently after that, with suspicion. The drift outside presses against it like a whisper daring you to open it. You check the rope you strung to the chicken shed twice, then a third time. You find yourself holding your breath when you step out, even for a second. Some say Henry was delirious from hunger. Others claim he got turned around in the snow, thought he was walking toward the barn but circled back. A few whisper it might have been exhaustion. He just lay down for a moment and let it happen. You don't care what the reason was. You just know he's gone. And now the rest of you are here, a little more aware, a little more afraid. More stories trickle in. A girl in Watertown wandered off during a whiteout looking for her dog and froze curled around a fence post. A farmer in De Smet collapsed while hauling a sled of corn stalks. A woman lit a fire in a sealed room and never woke up. You write their names on a board beside the stove, not to be morbid, but to remember, to stay alert. Each one is a reminder that the distance between alive and gone is thinner than a pane of frosted glass. You catch your breath every time someone goes out now, even if it's just to the woodpile or the tunnel entrance or the snow cave you carved weeks ago. You time them, you count, you listen for footsteps returning, you keep the door propped just slightly so you can hear if someone calls. But here's the cruel thing. Most of the time people don't call, not because they don't want to, but because when the cold hits hard enough you lose your voice. Your lungs seize, your throat locks, your lips stick together, and then it's just you, your frozen breath, and a sky that doesn't care. The scholars later call it exposure death, hypothermia, whiteout disorientation. They list the symptoms in tidy paragraphs: confusion, fatigue, loss of coordination, hallucinations, unconsciousness, death. They break it down like it's science. But out here you know the truth, it's silence. That's the last thing always. You don't die screaming, you die quiet. You ask yourself in the coldest parts of the night what you'd do if it happened to someone in your house. How you'd keep going if one of the children went missing, or if someone stepped out and didn't come back. You imagine it too clearly. You picture digging through the snow, hands raw and bleeding, calling a name into the wind and hearing only the scream of winter in reply. You think about what Henry's wife saw when she found him. That blue-grey stillness, that frozen look on his face like he was just resting. And you think, no. So you double your rules, you shorten every trip, you carry more rope, you pair up for even the smallest errands, you count heads twice a day, you memorize the sounds of each person's steps, you talk about spring again, not with hope, but like a place you're trying to reach on a map. Once spring comes, we'll rebuild the coop. Once spring comes, We'll dig out the shed. Once spring comes, you try not to say, if. Henry's death becomes a marker, not just for you, but for the whole community. Don't go Henry's way, people mutter. Tie your rope, or you'll end up like Henry. He becomes a cautionary tale, a prairie myth, the man who missed his own barn. But you don't joke. You remember the sound of that knock, the look on your neighbour's face when he said the words, the pause that followed. And when you go out the next morning to feed the cow, you hold the rope in your hand like a lifeline. Because it is. It happens in the middle of the night, of course. It always does. You wake to a sound so strange it takes a moment to place. Not wind, not a door creaking, not someone coughing in their sleep. It's a low, muffled groan, deep and long like something beneath the earth is shifting. You sit up fast. The walls seem to breathe. Then comes a crack so sharp it echoes off the rafters, like a tree splitting in the forest. The house goes still. You wait, every muscle tense. Another sound, more subtle this time, but no less terrifying. Crumbling. A slow, deliberate noise like grains of sugar pouring onto wood. Except it's not sugar. It's snow. You grab the lantern and swing it toward the wall near the front. The snow that had pressed there for weeks has started to break loose, not sliding down, but pressing in. The drift outside has finally gotten too heavy, and now it's pushing against the sod wall, testing it. One more storm and it might just come inside to say hello. You check the ceiling. Frost has formed in long stripes across the beams. You knock gently with the handle of a broom. One beam sounds hollow. That's not good. You whisper to your partner, who's already awake, listening. No one's sleeping now. By morning, the sound's everywhere. It's like the snow is shifting its weight, pressing against the house from all sides. Every once in a while there's a dull whump, and another piece of roof groans. You pile more snow on top of the drift, which sounds crazy, but you've learned that tightly packed snow can reinforce the roof. The real threat is when it starts to melt and shift. So for now, you dig, then stack. Dig, then stack. It's claustrophobic now. The windows have been gone for weeks, and the door is sealed tight. You check the stovepipe to make sure it's still drawing. You climb out the tunnel and look back at the house, and you can barely see it. Just the tip of the stovepipe, a crooked stick, and the narrow opening of your air shaft. Everything else is buried. You stare down at the roof and realise you're standing on it. You dig to the neighbour's place later that day. It takes hours, but it beats sitting in silence, waiting for your ceiling to collapse. You follow a flag someone tied to a broom handle weeks ago, now half buried. When you finally reach the door, you don't knock. You dig. You carve a small opening enough to shout through. Still in there? A pause, then, barely. You help dig them out. Their door has bowed inward, snow packed so tight against it that the hinges are bent. The front of their house looks like a beached whale. Curved, bulging, heavy with the weight of a world that's forgotten gravity. When you open the door, snow spills in like water through a cracked dam. Inside, it's damp. The walls are sweating. Their stove isn't drawing well. They've burned through most of their wood. Their youngest has a cough that rattles the whole room. "We need out," the mother says. "This house is sinking." She's not wrong. It's happening everywhere. The snow isn't just burying buildings, it's crushing them. You hear of a church roof that caved in under the weight. No one was inside. Thank God. A schoolhouse in another town collapsed while some kids were inside warming up. They were pulled out alive, but barely. Some folks are digging up their homes every 2 days just to keep the weight from turning their walls into splinters. A family you know wakes one morning to find the snow has pushed in a back wall. It looks like a glacier snuck in during the night. They retreat to the front room and board it up with chairs and planks and whatever's left of their winter woodpile. You start digging tunnels, not just from house to barn, but from house to sky. Narrow shafts punched upward through the drifts to release the pressure, like chimney vents. You call them relief holes, and they steam when you open them. You hope the warmth rising through them buys you time. At night, you listen for the telltale signs of strain, the slow creak of a wall leaning too far, the dry snap of a roof beam giving out, the sound of snow slumping downward, steady and patient like it's trying to smother you nicely. You don't sleep deeply anymore. One morning you wake to silence, not peace, not calm, silence. You rush to the stove. It's out. You rush to the door. It won't open. You panic, then remember. You were supposed to check the air shaft. You crawl to it, heart hammering. It's blocked. Clogged with overnight snowfall, you dig with your hands, clawing upward, coughing, dizzy. The air when it hits you is so sharp it hurts. You breathe anyway. After that, you set alarms. Well, routines, really. No one sleeps more than 2 hours straight. Every few hours, someone checks the stove, the shaft, the roof. It becomes mechanical. You count time in snow shifts. Outside, the landscape is unrecognizable. The towns are gone. Not just quiet, gone. Buried under snow so deep it's changed the shape of the land. Roof lines have vanished. A barn becomes a lump. A store becomes a cave. People are digging down to their homes now, not up from them. One story says a man tripped on something while shoveling and realised it was the steeple of his own church. He dug until he found the bell and rang it once for old time's sake. Another story says a cow wandered onto a roof, not realising it was a house, and fell through. No one was hurt. The family kept the cow. No one knows what's true anymore, but it all feels believable. Historians argue whether some of these buried structures ever recovered. Some say entire towns were flattened, never rebuilt. Others insist they rose again, one shovel at a time. You believe the second part, because you have to. You wrap your scarf, grab your snow knife, and climb out through the tunnel again. You stand on the roof of your home, stare at the horizon, and try to remember where the fence used to be, where the road went, where the sky began. Then you dig, because beneath you is everything, and you're not ready to lose it yet. You've been dreaming about sleds, not the polished kind with shiny runners and jingle bells, the kind they show on greeting cards or in the windows of fancy stores back east. No, your dreams are of desperate sleds, makeshift contraptions of bent wood, rusted nails and rope knotted from torn bedsheets. Sleds that don't glide so much as scrape, hauling more than joy, hauling hope, hauling food, hauling people who can't walk anymore. And when you wake up, it's not a dream that lingers, it's the need. You have to build one. Not for fun, not for escape, not even for travel. You need a sled because it might just be the one thing that keeps your family alive. You stare at what you've got. An old door, 2 broken chair legs, a strip of fence rail that didn't get burned yet, a pile of twine. It isn't much. It's nothing, really. But you've seen what people are building out there. Word travels through snow tunnels, through whispers in the feed stores and the few still open post stops. There are people surviving out there not because they have more, but because they've figured out how to move what they've got. And so you begin. You saw through the door with a rusted blade that squeals with each stroke. You sand the bottom with crushed coal and a wet rag, trying to smooth the splinters. You hammer on the chair legs, wrap them in a strip of leather soaked in lard, hoping they'll slide instead of sink. You loop twine through drilled holes and tie it off around your waist. It looks ridiculous, but it moves. Barely. The first test run is a bust. You drag it across the packed snow toward the shed, what's left of it, and it tips sideways immediately. Too light. You reload it, shift the weight, try again. This time it glides, uneven and slow but steady. You haul it in a circle, your breath freezing in strands across your lips. It takes everything out of you. But it works. Your kids name it the Ghost. You don't ask why. Maybe it's because of how it moves silently across the white, or maybe because everything out here now feels like a ghost. Half remembered, half real, never quite solid. Either way, you've got a working sled, and that changes everything. You use it to haul snow to melt, wood scraps, dried cow chips for fuel. You strap it up with ropes and harness yourself like an ox, pulling it to the neighbour's place with half a sack of frozen turnips you bartered for a single candle and a scrap of pork fat. You use it to bring back news, real news, from town. The sled doesn't just carry things, it carries connection. Soon enough, others are copying the idea. Someone down the road uses barrel staves. Another family ties their sled to the cow, who trudges along reluctantly, but steadily. You hear of a widow near Vermilion who built a sled out of coffin planks and used it to haul firewood from a dead tree she dug up with her bare hands. No one's making fun of coffin sleds out here. They're talking about building more. You get bold, you go to town. It's 7 miles by sled and you don't even know if the general store has anything left. But you pack a sack with goods to trade, salt, a bit of honey you'd been saving, a pair of wool socks, and set out before dawn. The wind is light, the sky flat and grey. It's the best kind of day you get anymore. You follow the snow markers people have placed, sticks with rags tied on, angled poles poking up like skeletal signposts. Every half mile you pass another house, another chimney poking out of a drift. No one waves. They're all inside watching you from behind frost-covered glass. When you get to town, it barely looks like a town anymore. Just mounds of snow with names beneath them. The blacksmith shop is entirely buried. The schoolhouse roof is barely visible. The general store still has a sign sticking out. You go inside, stomp off snow and look around. There's hardly anything left. A few tins, some beans, a couple of boxes of matches behind the counter. The owner nods at you like he's aged 10 years since you last saw him. You don't speak much. Just trade what you've got for a few things you need more. Dried apples, flour, real flour, a single candle. The walk home takes longer, you're heavier now, but it's a good weight, the kind that gives you hope. Later, you hang the candle on the wall, unlit, just to look at it. It's bright yellow, smooth, unburned. You won't use it unless you absolutely must. It's not light, it's a promise, and you start using the sled every day. Once you take it to bring a neighbour's sick child into your home, where your fire's stronger and the walls are thicker. Once, you use it to dig out a stuck cow, half buried in a drift, too cold to move, eyes wide and silent. You dig until your arms shake and drag her to shelter. She survives. You begin seeing sled tracks in the snow, little trails of humanity winding from one homestead to another. They overlap, connect, crisscross through the white void. It starts to look like a web of resistance, a quiet rebellion against the snow. Someone says there's a group using a relay system, families handing off sleds to each other like messengers, running supplies between towns. They call themselves the Drifters. You don't know if it's real, but you want it to be. Historians later talk about frontier ingenuity, but it's not about being clever. It's about being tired of standing still. Sleds didn't just carry things, they carried the idea that you weren't trapped. That even in the worst winter in living memory you could move, could help, could find something out there beyond the walls you'd been staring at since October. Your sled sits by the door now, coated in frost, always ready. Because if the long winter has taught you anything, it's that survival isn't just about warmth or food or stories. Sometimes it's about momentum. Even if it's just a few slow scraping feet at a time, it starts with a knock on the window. Not a visitor, just the wind slapping something loose. Maybe a board or a bit of rag that's been frozen stiff for weeks. You're used to those sounds by now. But what follows isn't. It's voices. Not shouting, nothing urgent or panicked. Just muffled speech, like someone talking through a scarf or under a snowbank. You peek through the slit in the quilt that covers the window and see figures moving toward you. 3 of them, bundled and dragging something behind them. Maybe a sled, maybe just a tarp tied at the corners and loaded with something heavy. You open the door cautiously and feel the wall of cold slap you like it's personal. They wave, you wave back. It's the Jensens. You recognise them barely through the layers of scarves and frost. They look like walking bundles of laundry, but they're smiling, exhausted, but smiling. And behind them, on that makeshift sled, is a barrel, a real wooden barrel, and inside it, according to Mrs. Jensen, is stew. Hot, fresh, shared. You stare at her like she's just told you spring arrived early. Then she says the 4 sweetest words you've heard in months. Come to the church. You hesitate for only a second before you start wrapping the children in every layer you can find. You wake the cow, whispering apologies as you move around her. You bank the fire, fasten the stovepipe, cinch scarves around chins and boots around half-frozen feet. The wind is biting, but you barely feel it. There's only one thought echoing in your head. Other people, warmth, food, light. You drag your sled just in case, the ghost still holding together, though one runner is cracking. You fill it with your trade goods, a jar of lard, 2 candles, a tin of boiled sweets you've hoarded like relics, the kind of things that mean more now than money ever did. The church is only a mile away, but it feels like crossing the Arctic. The wind rakes your face raw, and the snow is crusted over hard, jagged as broken glass. You guide the children like a caravan, heads down, trudging in single file. The sky above is a pale, bitter blue, cold light, sharp and sterile. Then you see it, just a little hump of white with a cross poking out. Someone's dug a tunnel entrance through the snowbank, framed with old boards and blankets to keep the wind out. A sign above it reads Soup and Song. The handwriting is shaky, uneven, but it might as well be a golden archway. You step inside, and the warmth hits you like a wall. It smells like life in there. Wood smoke, stew, melted wax, body heat. You breathe it in like perfume. The space is cramped. Just the main room of the church, the pews pushed aside and replaced with benches made from crates and old doors. Blankets hang over the windows. The pulpit is gone, replaced by a bubbling pot resting on 2 bricks and a stovepipe that snakes up through the ceiling. Someone hands you a bowl without asking. You don't even know what's in it. You don't care. You take a bite. Potatoes, real ones, and carrots. And, you could cry, a bit of meat. It tastes like hope. Now, you're not the only family here. There are at least 5 others, maybe more, all hunched around the fire, boots steaming, eyes wide. No one speaks too loudly. You've all forgotten how. Conversations happen in murmurs, like you're afraid this might be a dream you'll wake up from. Mrs. Jensen explains they've been doing this once a week when the weather allows. Everyone brings what they can. Half a sack of grain, a strip of meat, old coffee grounds, even flavouring scraped from empty tins. They call it the pot, and it's always cooking, each time someone hosts. This week it's the church. Next week, someone's barn, if the snow hasn't crushed it yet. You offer your sweets to the communal table. Someone gasps. A little girl clutches one like it's made of gold. You nod. It's worth it. After the meal, someone pulls out a fiddle. Yes, a fiddle. Where they've been keeping it this whole time, you have no idea. Maybe buried in a coal bin or under a bed. Maybe it's been waiting for a moment like this. The player tunes it slowly, fingers stiff and red from the cold, and then begins to play something soft and familiar. Not a hymn, not a dirge, a waltz. People laugh, actual honest laughter. Someone taps their boots, someone else starts clapping. A couple near the stove stands and begins a slow, awkward dance. Layers of coats and scarves turning the graceful steps into more of a shuffle. But it's dancing, it's movement. You haven't seen anyone dance in months. You let yourself smile, you let yourself feel. And for a moment, the long winter doesn't exist. The scholars and memoirs don't often mention this part. The gathering, the soup, the music. They focus on the hardship, the deaths, the food rations, the blizzards. And they're not wrong. But there's a part of the story that gets left out, this part. The part where people came together in old churches and buried barns, brought whatever scraps they had, and made a meal out of them. The part where they sang old songs and told stories and wrapped their kids in blankets made from patched coats. The part where they reminded each other that survival isn't just about calories and shelter and firewood, it's about showing up. You walk home that night full, not just in your stomach, but full in your chest, your mind. The wind has died down. The stars are out. You pull the sled behind you, lighter now, and for the first time in weeks you're not watching the horizon for a storm. You're watching for lanterns, because now you know they're out there. Other homes, other families, other fires still burning. The snow may bury everything, but it can't bury that. You reach your home, open the door, and the cow moos sleepily at you. You smile. You don't say it aloud, but for the first time in months you believe it. You're going to make it. You're used to measuring time in strange ways now. It's not days or weeks anymore. It's not even storms. It's how many candles you've burned, how many times you've reused the same tea leaves, how many meals you've scraped out of one bag of flour. Time isn't told by clocks, because you've stopped winding those. Time is now a stack of kindling, a length of rope, a dwindling pile of salt. So when the first crow shows up, it feels like a message. You're outside with the sled, checking on your tunnel after a night of hoarfrost that sculpted your airshaft into something almost cathedral-like. And there it is, on top of a snowbank as high as your head. Jet black, feathers ruffled from the cold, head cocked sideways like it's judging you. It lets out a sharp caw and flutters to a nearby tree. You stare, stunned. You haven't seen a bird in months, not since before the first blizzard. You call out to the kids inside, "Come quick." They think something's wrong, then they see it, and it's like the world opens an inch wider. Later you see more. 3, maybe 4 of them, flitting from snowbank to fence post, leaving tracks in the snow that look like bent stars. They circle the cow's pen, not menacingly, just curious, watching. The sound of them is almost absurd. It's noise, real noise, not the keening of wind, not the snap of frozen branches or the groan of a tired stove, but life. You don't even realise how much you've missed that until you hear the flap of wings. You listen for more, and then one morning you do hear more. Water! Not a lot, not gushing or dramatic, but water, actual liquid water, dribbling down the south side of the house where the sunlight hit hardest. It trails along a crack in the drift like the world is starting to weep. You press your fingers into it. Cold, wet, real. The kids call it the melting day, and you mark it on the wall. You still don't say spring, you don't dare, but the signs are there. You can feel something shifting beneath the snow, too slowly to call it a thaw, but enough to make you check the rafters again, just in case something slips. The weight is changing. You feel it in your knees when you walk across the floor, you feel it in your chest. Then comes the smell. Not a good one, not at first. The scent of things that have been buried too long. Rot, mud, something sour you can't place. It creeps in around the doorframe and out through the stovepipe. The cow picks up on it first, snorting and stamping like the air's turned strange. And she's right. The smell is truth. There's something out there now besides snow and wind. Something older, earthier. You find the first patch of dirt 3 days later. It's just a corner, no bigger than a shoe, tucked behind the barn skeleton where the drift split during the last breeze. You kneel beside it like it's a grave and press your fingers into the black. It's still frozen underneath, but the top layer gives, and that's enough to make you cry. From there, it becomes a ritual. You go out each morning and search for signs of not winter, not spring, not warmth, not green, but absence. Absence of snow, absence of silence, absence of death. You find tracks, fox maybe, rabbit more likely. You find twigs poking through the drifts, brittle and brown but upright. You find feathers. One day you find your own shovel, the one you lost back in January during a dig when the wind kicked up. You thought it was gone forever, but there it is, the handle poking up like a periscope. You pull it free and wipe away the frost. You hang it by the door like a trophy. That Sunday, you go back to the church. More people this time. Some you haven't seen since before Christmas. Some you didn't expect to ever see again. But there they are, alive. Thinner, paler, quieter. But there. They bring whatever they've got. Someone's carved spoons out of driftwood. Someone else brought wild rose hips they found on a southern slope. You tell them about the crow. They tell you about the rabbit they saw darting across a bare patch of field. Another family says their cow gave birth to a calf. Early, small, but healthy. Everyone gasps. New life. Someone starts singing. Not a hymn this time, but a work song. Rhythmic. Easy. A tune you can sing while digging or hauling, or just rocking a baby to sleep. A few people hum along. The tune drifts up into the rafters, through the stovepipe, and out into the thin, bright air. Outside, the snow begins to soften. It's not over, you know that. The storms could come back. The drifts could deepen. March is unpredictable, and April isn't safe either. But something has changed. The snow doesn't stick like it used to. The wind still bites, but it doesn't bury. And the sun, it lingers a little longer each night. There are debates about what really caused the long winter, volcanic ash in the atmosphere, a change in solar cycles, a fluke in the jet stream. You don't care. You'll let the scientists argue over charts and patterns. Out here you believe in different things, like snow melting from the south side first, like crows as omens, like the smell of dirt meaning survival. That night, you take a walk by yourself. You leave the sled behind, leave the tools, the rope, the rules. Just you, your coat, and your breath fogging in front of you. The stars are sharp, endless. The moonlight glints off the snow in ways that make you dizzy. But you keep walking until you reach that patch of ground behind the barn. You kneel, and for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like prey. You feel like a person. You touch the earth with bare fingers. It doesn't bite. The first sound of running water doesn't come from a creek or a well. It comes from inside the wall. It happens just after breakfast. If you can call boiled flour and old salt pork breakfast, when you're sitting by the stove, rubbing warmth into your fingers, you hear it faintly, beneath the usual pops and groans of thawing wood. A little trickle, like a leaky pipe. Except you don't have pipes. No one out here does. You follow the sound, press your ear to the wall. There it is again, a gurgle, then a tiny drip, drip, drip. You step outside into the tunnel and listen harder, and that's when you see it. A narrow streak cutting down the side of the snowbank, carving a shallow line into the white. Water. Your brain doesn't quite process it at first. You haven't seen liquid in so long that you almost forget how it moves. But there it is, slow, brownish, and definitely real. You crouch beside it and watch it slide down into a crack, vanishing. You dip a finger in, Cold, yes, but not frozen. You don't cheer. You don't scream or laugh. You just stare at it transfixed, like you're watching something sacred. Because out here, in a world still half buried and starved for warmth, a few drops of water feel like a resurrection. From that point on, the change speeds up. The snow doesn't just melt, it sinks. You wake one morning and the tunnel roof has collapsed. Not entirely, just in a sagging, tired kind of way. Like the snow is finally too exhausted to hold its own weight. You dig it out, but not with urgency. Because now the digging feels different. It's not about survival, it's about uncovering. The sun has teeth now. Real heat, not just light. You can feel it soaking into your coat, warming the crown of your head. Your breath doesn't freeze instantly anymore. The air smells like old roots and compost, like something buried and rotten coming back to life. The children make a game of it. First to find the ground wins. They poke sticks into the snow and whoop when they hit dirt. One of them finds a half-buried corn cob, perfectly preserved in ice, and declares it a treasure. You laugh. You can't help it. For the first time in half a year, there's laughter in your house that doesn't sound forced. The cow starts standing more, walking a little. She licks the air and snorts, ears perked at every sound like she's hearing the world again for the first time. You take her outside on a rope when the wind dies down, just to let her stand in the sun. She closes her eyes like it's bathing her. The chickens begin pecking. Not at food, but at the ground. They found patches near the shed where the snow pulled back and the soil's turned black and spongy. They scratch at it with wild energy, and for a second it's like watching summer in miniature. The tools come back out. The real ones. The scythe, the spade, the broken rake you've repaired with fence wire. You line them up along the side of the house like a to-do list. Not for escape, not for digging out, for planting. Then the rivers come back. First just a trickle, an uncertain stream winding its way through the fields, then suddenly a flood. Ice jams break in the middle of the night with booms that sound like gunshots. You wake up to find the lowlands turned into lakes, snowmelt rushing so fast it rips away fences, carries off barrels and logs and broken sleds. You run outside and find your sled, the ghost, floating in the muck caught on a fence post. You wade in up to your knees and pull it out, mud sucking at your boots. You set it upside down to dry and just stand there staring at the moving water. It's chaos, sure, but it's also life, the earth taking a big gurgling breath. Someone upriver loses a chicken coop to the flood. Someone else watches an outhouse float past like a boat with no captain. You all laugh about it at the next gathering, even though you know someone will have to build it again from scratch. The laughter isn't cruel, it's necessary. You have to laugh. You've spent too long not doing it. The town starts to emerge like a ship coming out of fog. You walk the main road again, though road is generous. It's more a muddy trench between two long ridges of leftover snow. The storefronts appear one by one. The schoolhouse door is cracked and half off the hinges, but it stands. The blacksmith shop has a collapsed roof. The general store is damp and mostly empty, but still there. The townsfolk are slow to reappear, cautious, like animals poking their heads out of burrows. You exchange stories. Who made it? Who didn't? You don't say much. No one does. But you're all here, and that means more than any words could. Someone organises a clean-up day. You show up with your kids, your tools, your cow tied behind you like she's part of the work crew. You help haul debris from the stream. You hammer planks into a schoolhouse door. You sweep out mud and leaves and what looks like a dead possum that rode in on a log. And when it's over, the town feels like a town again, not just a snow-covered rumour. Scholars call this the melt stage. They use terms like runoff and permafrost thaw and soil saturation. They measure water tables and river volume and document which crops failed and which pests returned. But you know what the melt really is? Forgiveness. The earth forgiving you for surviving, letting you come back to it. You go out that night and sit in the mud near the shed, just breathing in the smell of thaw. It's not a pretty smell. Mildew, rot, old straw, something dead you haven't found yet, but it's real. And you know, deep down, that you can live in it, not just through it, in it. You take a bit of dirt in your hand, clump it, feel it stick to your palm. You've forgotten the way it clings, the weight of it, the smell. You press it to your lips, not because you're crazy, but because you're grateful. Because after everything the long winter tried to bury, this is still here. And so are you. You start the day with a stub of chalk and a flat board. Not because there's anything to teach exactly, but because the children need something to do. You draw a line, then a shape, then a crooked letter. Their eyes light up like it's a carnival. They sit cross-legged on the packed dirt floor, fingers still red from hauling wood, and whisper answers to each other like the snow might still hear. The youngest doesn't know her letters anymore. The oldest is starting to teach her again. School is back. Not officially. There's no bell, no desks, no schedule. But here you are, tracing the alphabet with a piece of chalk traded for eggs, pretending that life is normal. And in a way it is. The blizzards are over. The snow is melting. The air no longer smells like ash or fear. It smells like mud, like grass, like survival. The schoolhouse itself is still too unstable to use, so you make do at home. Others do the same. Each family teaches what they remember. Math, writing, songs, the names of stars. Someone brings a stack of old readers that were rescued from a half-buried barn. The pages are curled and damp, but the words are still there. See Jane run? You chuckle. Jane must have run to warmer places. At night, the children read by firelight. They take turns holding the books like sacred relics. One sounds out every word. Another just flips the pages, reading silently, lips moving, eyes far away. You ask them what they're reading, and they say spring. You don't correct them. Soon, more families gather to reopen the real school. It's not fancy, but it stands. The snow has sunk enough that you can see the windows now. Glass cracked, one missing, but still a window. Sunlight slips through it in patches, and the floorboards have dried into warped hills. Someone cleans out the stove. Someone else patches the roof with strips of hide. You bring a bench you carved during the worst part of January. There's no teacher yet, not officially, so you all take turns. One day it's the old German widow who knows 5 languages and tells stories about Beethoven. Another day it's the man who used to be a bookkeeper and still has multiplication tables memorized down to the 12. You try your hand at teaching history, but the kids just want to hear what you did during the storms. They think you're a legend now. You laugh and tell them you just kept the cow alive and didn't fall into a snowbank. They don't believe you. With the return of the schoolhouse comes the return of the order. Not the kind on calendars or clocks, but the rhythm of days. You rise early, cook something warm, brush hair, lace boots. The children pack little satchels of slates and pencils, a crust of bread tucked inside like treasure. They walk the muddy road with others, kicking at patches of green that dare to peek through. They sing as they go. You can hear it from the house. Songs about spring, about the sun, about birds returning. One about pancakes that you suspect someone made up on the spot. It's not perfect. One boy still won't speak, not since his father didn't return from a trip to town. Another girl flinches at loud noises. A few still wear gloves even indoors, like their fingers remember the cold too deeply. But they show up. Every day, and slowly the weight begins to lift. One afternoon, the children come running back from school yelling about a flower. You think they're joking. They're not. They drag you outside, down the path, across the muddy road, behind a rock still half-coated in crusted snow, and point. There it is, tiny, pale, bent from the wind, a crocus. You crouch beside it, not speaking, not even breathing for a moment. The petals are almost translucent, like it's not even sure it belongs here, like it's apologizing for blooming too soon. And yet, it bloomed anyway. You don't pick it. You leave it exactly where it is. A child reaches out to touch it and you stop them. Not unkindly, just gently. Let it live, you say. They nod solemnly, and you all stare at it like it's a miracle, because it is. The town starts printing broadsheets again. Not a full paper, there's not enough ink or energy for that, but a single sheet passed around with updates. A baby born, a well-repaired, a storm warning that didn't come to pass. Someone sets up a tiny lending library out of a dry goods crate. Another family starts baking again. Just small batches, but the smell of bread in the wind makes everyone pause. A town elder says they should hold a fair in the summer. People laugh, but no one says no. You can feel it. A rebalancing, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Like the seasons coming home after being lost. You find your old seed box buried beneath a pile of broken tools. You open it cautiously. Inside, shriveled pods, folded paper packets, a few kernels that look like hope in disguise. You lay them out on the table one by one, inspecting them like old coins. Some might still be good, others are clearly ruined, but you plant them all anyway. You dig into the soil with your bare hands, cool, damp, alive. The children help. You show them how to space the rows, how to cover the seeds without packing too tight. They listen carefully, more serious than you've ever seen them. These aren't just chores now, these are choices, things you get to do, things that mean tomorrow still matters. You water with melted snow, you watch, you wait. They don't sprout right away, but one morning you spot a sprig, just a single green nub poking out of the black. You bend down. It smells like nothing, but it smells like something. You close your eyes, and for the first time in nearly a year you breathe in spring. The first thunderstorm rolls in like a visitor who doesn't knock. 1 minute the sky's pale blue, spotted with little flocks of returning birds that chatter like gossipers in a market square. And then, boom! The sound shakes your teeth. You jump. The kids shriek, but not in fear, more like surprise or awe. You all run to the door and step outside into the open air, and there it is, that heavy, dark, living sky. Not flat and white like it's been all winter, but rich with movement, clouds rolling over each other like animals stretching after a long sleep. The wind smells different, not cold, not dry, but thick, wet, promising. The first drop hits your forehead and feels like a slap. The second hits your nose, and then it pours. It's not graceful at all. This isn't one of those soft spring showers on a wildflower field kind of things. This is a downpour, loud, rude, and unapologetic. It slaps the roof, pounds the mud, drowns the chicken yard, and turns the path to the barn into a miniature river. It pours off the eaves and floods the trench you dug for water runoff. It makes you laugh out loud. Because after 6 months of snow, the wetness is incredible. You don't even care that your boots are soaked, or that the water is pouring down your collar. You stand there grinning, soaking, and utterly alive. The cow doesn't love it. The chickens hate it. But you'd dance in it if your knees weren't so sore. That storm changes everything. By morning, the landscape has shifted again. The last of the snowbanks have been pummeled into grey heaps. The air smells of worms and pine. The creeks are roaring. The ground is mud. Real mud. Not the kind you shovel, but the kind that sucks at your boots when you step in it. And the earth? It's breathing again. You swear you can hear it. Roots stretching, buds forming, and the thaw's done, now comes the burst. The trees are the next to return. At first they just stand there looking dead, like props. But then little green flares start popping from the branches. Buds so small you miss them if you're not paying attention. But you're paying attention to everything now. Every stem, every shadow. You find yourself inspecting trees like a doctor with a stethoscope. You snap off a twig and break it open. Green inside, you smile. You walk into town the next day and the smell hits you before the buildings do. Not food, not smoke, soil, damp, churned up earth, warm underfoot. People are already outside, shoveling, cleaning, hammering. Kids stomp puddles. Women shake out rugs like they're banishing ghosts. The general store has reopened its side window. No one's really shopping yet, but the fact that it's open is enough. Someone says they're expecting a shipment. By rail. The first train since before the winter. The idea of it makes your stomach do a little flip. That train is all anyone can talk about. For days, people walk down to the station. Well, the snow-cleared patch where the station used to be, and just wait. Listening. Watching the tracks. You go too. You feel a little silly, standing there with the others in the middle of a muddy field, eyes on the horizon like you're watching for a ghost ship. Then, one morning, it happens. The whistle is faint at first, a high, keening sound that seems to come from inside you. You lift your head. Others around you stop mid-conversation. A little girl screams and runs back toward town. Then the smoke appears, black and curling and moving, and suddenly the train is there, chugging and shrieking and huffing like some mechanical god. Everyone cheers. No one can help it. Hats come off. Tears run down cheeks. Grown men clap each other on the back. Kids wave and shout. The whistle screams again and someone in the back yells, "We're saved!" And for once no one calls him dramatic because it feels like salvation. The train brings everything. Flour, nails, oil, soap, paper, letters, coffee and fruit. A single crate of oranges rolls off that train and into the arms of the general store owner like it's a newborn. He cuts one open on the spot, hands out slices. You get one. You haven't tasted anything so bright in your entire life. The juice runs down your chin. You don't even wipe it off. You savour every molecule. That orange might as well be a religious experience. Spring hits the ground running after that. People are busy now, not just surviving, but working, building, planning. You help dig a new foundation for a neighbour's shed. You trade labour for lumber. You string up a fence for the cow to graze in. Grass. Real, soft, ticklish grass that smells like June and feels like memory. The children stop asking about the snow. They ask about seeds, chores, school days. One of them finds a turtle near the creek and adopts it on the spot, naming it Blizzard. You try not to laugh, but it's too perfect. Blizzard is now the family pet. You build him a pen. Because of course you do. At the next gathering in the church, someone suggests a May Day celebration. A real one, with flowers and music and food if anyone has enough. The kids are wide-eyed. They've never seen a festival. Not a real one. You offer to bring eggs. You've got 5 now. 5 glorious, ridiculous eggs. You plan to boil them and dye them with beets and onion skins. Someone else says they'll try to bake. Someone else promises music, and someone else starts crying and apologises. No one minds. You all understand. That night, back at home, you sit outside with your coat open and your boots off. The air is cool, but not cold. A breeze moves the grass like it's brushing the world's hair. You stare up at the stars and feel something settle inside you. Not just peace, but trust. That this place, this life, this battered little stretch of prairie still holds room for joy. You made it through, and now you get to live again. The May Day celebration begins with a flower no one expected. An entire handful, in fact, discovered by the Johnson girl near the river bend where the ice broke up last week. Violets, she says. They're scraggly, crooked things, half crushed from being yanked up roots and all, but she clutches them like they're a crown. And maybe they are. She gives one to everyone at the gathering, including the cow, who eats hers instantly. The rest of you tuck them into buttonholes and braid them into hair and string them up on fence wire. The whole town smells faintly like wet leaves and new promises. The celebration isn't grand. No one has the strength or supplies for that. But it feels big. There's music, yes. Fiddle and washboard, played a little too fast and a little off-key, but with such heart that you don't care. Someone pounds a stick on a crate for rhythm. The children dance in a lopsided circle, twirling around a pole made from a stripped tree limb. They don't know the traditional steps, so they invent their own, hopping and spinning and shouting with uncoordinated glee. You join in. So do the old folks. So does the widow who hasn't smiled since her chimney collapsed in February. Everyone dances like they've been unshackled from the past 6 months of cold and hunger and silence. Because in a way you have. Someone sets out food. It's humble. Boiled eggs dyed in speckled yellows and pinks. Hard biscuits softened with wild honey. Pickled onions, dried berries, and a stew so thick with root vegetables you'd swear it was a feast. Someone brings rhubarb pie made with the first red stalks of the season. It's tart, strange, and divine. You take a bite and feel like you've bitten into the sun. People stand in circles and talk, not just about how they survived, but what they'll do next. Planting schedules, fence repairs, barn raisings. A real schoolteacher maybe, if the railroad will bring one this time. They talk about wheat, about building better chimneys, about putting in cellar vents so the next time the snow comes it won't trap them like rats in a box. Everyone's got plans now. Because for the first time in forever, the future isn't an enemy, it's an invitation. The mayor, a wiry man with wind-chapped cheeks and a hat that's more hole than hat, stands up on a barrel and clears his throat. We're calling this day, he says, the start over. He pauses. Not the beginning, not the end, just the part where we do it again, but smarter. Everyone laughs, but it sticks. People start calling it that, the start over, like it's a holiday. And why not? If any group has earned a second shot, it's you. Okay. You walk home that night with your boots muddy and your arms around your youngest, who fell asleep mid-pie. The stars are out, and for once they don't feel so cold and far away. The town is quiet now, but not empty. You can feel the lives buzzing inside the homes as you pass them. Firelight flickers behind curtains. A baby cries faintly in the distance. Someone laughs. Someone else sings a tune that fades into the breeze. And the breeze itself is soft now. You reach your house, still battered, still leaning slightly from that January drift, but yours. And inside, you find everything where it should be. The stove warm, the cow chewing softly, the seeds in their little boxes by the window. You sit down, pull off your boots, and listen to the sounds of your house settling for the night. Creaks, hums, breathing, no blizzard pounding the walls, no wind trying to sneak under the door, just quiet, just spring. You spend the next weeks watching the land uncurl. The trees explode into leaf with almost indecent urgency, as if they're racing to make up for lost time. The grass rises overnight, the mud dries, the fence lines reappear, like bones rising out of the earth. Every day something else shows its face, a green blade here, a bud there, a rabbit bold enough to hop through the yard in full daylight. The children begin building again, forts out of scrap lumber, ramps for their sleds turned wagons, little traps for minnows by the stream. You help when they ask, but mostly just watch. They've grown without you noticing, older, stronger, smarter. Their winter wasn't just hard, it was formative. You think of the person you were before the snow came, not better, not worse, just softer. Now your edges have hardened, but your heart hasn't. At least not entirely. You still cry when you find a robin's egg in the yard. You still smile when the stove catches flame on the first strike. You've lost some things, people, animals, time, but you've gained something too. A ferocity, a clarity, a kind of respect for the ground beneath your feet and the sky above your head. You earned this spring. You built it. Then one morning you wake up and realise something. You haven't thought about the snow in days. It hits you like a strange, quiet revelation. You sit up, swing your feet out of bed and feel warm wood beneath them. No ice, no draught, no fear. You open the door and the air greets you not with a slap, but with a caress. The fields outside are green now, not just patches, whole fields, alive and rustling in the breeze. You step out onto the porch and let the sun hit your face. And for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, you don't brace yourself, you just breathe. The historians will later write about the Great Winter of 1880 to 1881 as one of the most brutal in recorded American history. They'll note the number of blizzards, the depth of the snow, the duration of the freeze, the miles of railroad abandoned, the families lost. But they'll miss this part. The way people came back, how they carried each other through it, how they rebuilt not just homes and barns, but routines, faith, friendships, the quiet, defiant joy of starting over, again and again and again, like prairie grass that keeps returning no matter how many times it's flattened, like crocuses in the ditch, like violets in a little girl's hand. You go to bed that night without lighting a candle. You don't need to. The darkness doesn't feel threatening anymore, it just feels like rest. The planting begins before the ground is even fully dry. The frost is gone, but the soil is still heavy, thick with the last of a winter's sorrow. Doesn't matter. You've waited long enough. Everyone has. The whole town moves like a waking beast, muscles stiff but ready. Spades go into the dirt. Calloused hands press seeds into furrows. Someone borrows a mule from the next township over, and it becomes a minor celebrity. Best set of hooves this side of the divide, someone jokes. You don't need the mule. Your cow, stubborn and heroic, shoulders the yoke for half a day and earns a rest and an entire bucket of mash. You stroke her neck and whisper thanks. She made it through too. You wonder, not for the first time, how many cows didn't. You plant potatoes first, always the safest, then onions, beans, corn, everything you still have seed for. The ground is forgiving. It accepts what you give it. Not a guarantee, but a chance. And that's all you're asking for now. The kids scatter wildflower seeds just because. You don't stop them. You even join in. They toss them by the handful into the wind, laughing like they're feeding the sky. You imagine petals blooming in random patches come July, bursts of colour where no one expected life. That feels like a metaphor, but you let it sit quiet. The cemetery, small and windswept, gets a cleaning. No one asks anyone to do it, it just happens. Folks show up with rags and buckets, scrub the headstones, plant a few flowers, rebuild the fence where the storm knocked it down. Some of the names are fresh. One marker was made from the back of a cupboard door, the lettering burned in with a fire poker. You stop in front of Henry's grave. Someone's laid a crow feather there, wrapped with twine. You don't say anything, you just stand for a while, hat off, hand over your heart. Then you move on, because you have to. Mail starts arriving again, trickling in like water through cracked ice. Letters from back east, from cousins and aunts and suppliers and preachers. Notes scribbled in pencil on scraps of paper, crammed into envelopes sealed with candle wax. One woman gets news that her sister gave birth in January. Twins. One lived, one didn't. Everyone reads their mail out loud now. It's a public thing. You share joy and sorrow like it's food. The postmaster tacks some letters to the wall just so people can reread them. One of them says simply, "We heard you survived. We wept. Write back." You do. You sit down at your little table by the window and write by sunlight, not lantern light. Your handwriting is worse now. Your fingers are stiffer, but your words come out clear. We made it, you write. We're planting now. The earth is soft again. The world is still here. You pause, then add, so are we. People start courting again. It's subtle at first, a longer than usual look between two folks at the community supper. An awkward handoff of seeds with fingers brushing just a bit too long. You see it. Everyone sees it. After what you've all endured, it feels right. Nobody mocks it. There's no time for teasing. You overhear someone whisper, you can't let a whole winter go by and not say what matters. That sticks with you. You think about the things you didn't say in January, the things you thought you might never get to say again. You think about how many times you stared at your children and wondered if it would be the last. You hold them tighter now, even when they squirm. The ice house gets cleaned out. The last of the preserved meat is taken out and either eaten or bartered. You help chop new blocks for storage, harvested from what little remains of the high creeks. A younger boy falls in and is pulled out fast, soaked and shivering but laughing. Colder than death, he says, grinning. Everyone laughs. It's not that you've forgotten how bad it was. It's that you remember and laugh anyway. You've earned that. The prairie, once flat and white and howling, is now humming. Bees, flies, birds in shrill argument. The long grasses rise, green and sharp. The fence posts reappear. The horizon grows wide again. You can see where your land ends and someone else's begins. You hang laundry in the sun. You open windows without fear. You stop sleeping with your boots by the door. There's no more need for the tunnel, so you collapse it. Let the snow melt into the soil. Let it feed the roots. Let it vanish. The stove, your dearest companion all winter, now sits idle most days. You run your fingers over its surface, cold to the touch now, like something asleep. You clean out the ashes one last time and sweep the floor, where it feels like goodbye. One night there's a dance, not in the church, it's too crowded, but in the barn newly re-roofed and swept clean. Lanterns hang from rafters. Someone sets up a phonograph with a cracked horn, and it warbles like a dying goose, but no one minds. You dress in your best. Patched shirt, brushed hair, polished boots. You dance. You hadn't planned to. Your knees complain, and your hands are still rough, but when the music starts, your body just moves. Others follow. You spin, you laugh. You remember what joy feels like in your bones, and when you look up and see the stars blinking down not through a frost-bitten window but in open air, you know it's over, not just the winter, but the fear, the waiting and the silence. They'll call this year the long winter in the books, the harshest season in memory, storm after storm, isolation, hunger, death. That's all true, but it's not the full story, not to you, because the full story is this: the dancing, the planting, the rebuilding, the naming of turtles, the passing of oranges from hand to hand, the taste of stew in a church full of survivors. The full story is that the earth didn't just thaw, you did, and someday, when a future child asks you, was it really that bad? You'll lean back, eyes far away, and say, yes, but then you'll smile and say, and it was also beautiful, because it was, because you were there, because you lived to see spring again. The house creaks differently now, not under snow, not from the groan of cold beams trying to hold together against blizzard winds, but with the kind of gentle settling wood does when it's warm. You lie in bed and feel the softness of the night air rolling in through the open window, cool but kind, smelling of dirt and distant lilac. The fan hums lightly beside you, and the stars blink their slow rhythm above the prairie. It's quiet. No scratching winds, no sudden thumps on the roof, no fear of waking up trapped inside ice. You made it. You all did. And now the seasons have kept their promise. The warmth returned, the earth gave way, the grass pushed back up through the crusted remains of winter and took back the land. Life, stubborn as ever, rose up out of the mud. You think about how far you've come, from the first flake to the last thaw, from silence to song, from that cold, brutal November to this soft, forgiving spring. You remember the days you thought the sun might never come back. But it did. It always does. Not on your schedule, not for free, but it does. And maybe, just maybe, next winter won't be as cruel. Or maybe it will. But now you know what you didn't before, that you are harder to kill than the cold ever knew. That a sled and a can of beans can become a lifeline. That a tune on a fiddle and a candle in a window are enough to keep a town alive. You close your eyes, the prairie sleeps, the wind moves like breath through the tall grass. Somewhere a frog sings, and everything is finally beautifully quiet.